All right, guys. So who is ready? Who is ready for uh, technical difficulties, bad restreaming, disorganized content, getting the hours wrong? Are you guys ready for that? Are you guys excited for that? I don't even know which chat I'm looking at. All right. So someone said, "Hey, Ryan, why would you just stream on Koji? Why don't you stream on like a bunch of other sites and stuff?" And like, well, the reason for that is I have a program that restreams it. I press a button, I hope it works, and it may or may not work. So that's that's sort of a thing. So you gave up on Cozy? No, I'm streaming on Cozy. It's free real estate, you know. And I'm on Cozy. I'm on YouTube. What else? Am I on Rumble? Oh yeah, I'm also on Rumble. Got 9 viewers on Rumble. Excellent. Kick. I think we have 0 viewers on Kick. Excellent, excellent. Uh, so so whatever. Please maintain a proper stream archive. Go ahead. So I really had no idea of what I wanted to stream about, but I just felt like I wanted to stream a little bit. So what? So just sort of what is like going on in my head, because I have opinions. Right, I have all sorts of opinions. What's going on in my head is that like the whole situation in Ukraine is what I'm sort of thinking about, and like all this like insane mania to fight against Russia, to fight the war against Russia, and how it's all, and you see it over and over again, like, well, if we didn't stop Hitler here, right, we would just go on to another country, and that was the lesson. That was the lesson of World War II, right? And this idea of like you have to stop. I don't know what the lesson, like how you apply that. Any revision is bad. You can never revise borders ever, because as soon as you give someone like Putin anything, he's then going to try to take over the world or something, right? It's based on learning the wrong lessons from World War II. And Tucker Carlson, he made this point like a bit more diplomatically, saying that, like, saying something to paraphrase, saying using a single event from the 1940s as your rubric for all geopolitical interactions and a lesson on how to deal with territorial revision, that's insane. And Tucker, I mean, that's absolutely right as far as it goes. It's insane to use a single regime episode as a rubric for everything, but obviously, even that episode, right, that sort of the founding myth of NATO, right, which is the Nazi aggression myth, the founding myth of NATO, right, that in itself is a total lie, and it has real consequences, right? It's not nothing, right? It's leading to just bad ideas about how to deal with Russia, bad idea, right? Just turning, like, territorial revisions have happened throughout the world for like all time, right? And none of them have to become like death war, like coalition death wars, right? Unless you want to make them into coalition death wars. So, so anyway, so let me see if I can look at chat on. What am I looking at? Am I looking at? Okay, so I'm looking at Cozy. I think it's Cozy and YouTube are the two chats that I'm looking at. NATO, private military force for the banksters. Shout out to all the homies. All that. He's back. Because modern morality is centered around Hitler or not Hitler. Do you watch Zoomer Historian? Yeah, a bit. He has some pretty good videos. He's like, I watched a lot of his videos, and it's like there's like one thing that actually means there's one view on Rumble. No, it says there's 16 viewers on Rumble. 16 viewers on Rumble. Anyway, so I think the first issue is sort of this kind of this kind of wag the dog bullshit. Um, is that like when you say that that Poland forced Hitler into war, okay, to a lot of people, like on first glance, especially with hindsight, especially with 2020 hindsight on how ineffectual the Polish army was compared to the German army at that time, right? With hindsight, that sounds kind of absurd, right? Because you look at what happened in the Polish German War, and you go, well, it would seem insane for the Poles to try to pick a fight with Germany, or try to deliberately invite that upon themselves, right? That sounds insane. But first off, at the time, and I have like these PDFs open, but again, it's like highly, I'm like super disorganized. Um, there's this amazing book. It's amazing. It's The Forced War by David Hogan. It's amazing, but it's also just incredible. It doesn't really get to the point. It really goes over all manner of like diplomatic intrigue. That's mainly what the book is about. Is diplomatic intrigue. Um, but this pattern of inviting war upon yourself for some sort of political gain, it's one, not that uncommon, and two, it actually has paid off. And I have like a few examples that I wrote down on my pad here. One example would be Chiang Kai-shek inviting an attack from Japan. A lot of people don't know is that before the Marco Polo Bridge incident, um, it's kind of similar with Poland. Is that the Germans were constantly saying that the Poles were doing lots of stuff and the West was denying it. And same thing was happening with Japan v China. Japanese were saying, oh, Chinese are infiltrating into Manchuria, stirring up partisans and all little activity. But one thing that we know that the Chinese did is that they attacked the Japanese quarter in Shanghai. Right? And they only attacked the Japanese quarter. They didn't attack the French or British or America or anyone else. They only attacked the Japanese quarter, right? Which kind of makes sense if you think of what Chiang Kai-shek was trying to do. Because Chiang Kai-shek, there's nothing really on this here. Chiang Kai-shek, his idea was to Chiang Kai-shek. Let's get rid of this turd here. Chiang Kai-shek, at the time, he was in a situation in China where the KMT was obviously the biggest faction, in charge of China, but he also had to deal with the Guangxi clique, the Yunnan clique, the Zibei, Sanma, and so he was having difficulty in fully securing control over China. And similar to what Bismarck did v France, was what seems to have happened is that once Japan invaded China, these the smaller warlords came into line and basically accepted control, centralized control from the KMT over China. And so you could say that like the idea of China provoking Japan to attack for the purpose of for the purpose of Chiang Kai-shek to consolidate rule in China, oh, that sounds crazy, but the thing is, it actually worked, right? It literally happened. So now in that situation, why did that happen? Well, if you look at basically everyone else who ever fought a war with China up to that point, the European powers, Russia, and Japan, what they would do is they would fight a limited war, defeat a few Chinese armies, grab some clay, and then move to consolidate what they've taken. Nobody up to that point ever went into China with the intention of conquering China. Holy shit, shut up. So in 1937, when the Japanese are attacking China, um, and this is not the main point of this stream. This stream is going to be more about Czechoslovakia and Poland. Um, but when the Japanese actually went into China, they didn't necessarily have any stated goal that they were going to conquer the whole of China, right? That wasn't, they didn't have any particular claims on what territory they would demand. It was more sort of like, well, we'll fight a war with the Chinese. We'll see how it goes, and then based on how it goes, we'll make our demands based on that. And I think that was the thinking of the Japanese going into China in 1937. The problem is that unlike all the previous times that any European or Japanese power went to war with China, the Chinese were not suing for peace under Chiang Kai-shek. And we know that at this time, even in 37, 38, we know that Chiang Kai-shek was being... Oh, is the stream... Something wrong with the stream here? Okay. We know that Chiang Kai-shek was... I forgot what was being supported by the West, right? And this, of course, ended up meaning that he kept fighting and fighting and fighting and would not come to any terms, right? And as we know later on, the war in China, the war in China was used as an excuse to embargo Japan. And that embargo of Japan meant no oil, and ultimately Japan, as we know, lashed out at Pearl Harbor as a result of that. So that's sort of an example of that. Do you ever socialize with people in the real world? Yes. This is what it's like. You have to work with what you got sometimes. Yeah, you have to work with groypers sometimes. Yeah, that's what people say. Is like, why are you streaming on Cozy when like there's so many shitty groypers? Like, well, I mean, like, yeah, you just have to work with people. So anyway, so China v. Japan, that's an example of the sort of wag the dog strategy. Now, the wag the dog strategy does sort of require a willing participant. In this case, China was the willing participant v. Japan. So China, right, was used to provoke a war with Japan, which was the target of mainly the United States, right? Because remember, up to World War I, the British and the Japanese had an alliance. The United States more or less convinced the British to break off their alliance with Japan in order to, we see why they did that, because we see that the United States was not a big fan of the Japanese presence in the Pacific, really. That's really what it boils down to. And the U.S.-Japanese war in the Pacific that's the proof that was basically the United States' attitude towards Japan in the Pacific, which was, we don't want you there. This is our domain. We want to be basically the rulers of the Pacific, not you. And they did, and they sort of were for a while. So that's that's that thing. Another example of this wag the dog strategy would be Serbia and Austria-Hungary. This wasn't directly done. Ryan is now reading what I said. This wasn't really directly done by Britain. This was done more by this was done by France and Russia, which was to guarantee Serbia. Right, so Serbia is now guaranteed. Why do sodomites want everyone else to be guilty of their atrocious sin? I don't know. Go ask Nick. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so the French and Russians, they guarantee Serbia. And what that does is that means that now Serbia, like if they, the Serbian state is supporting all sorts of like low-level sort of agitation stuff in the Austro-Hungarian Empire, right? They're promoting separatists, the Serbian separatists in Bosnia, just doing random partisan things. Eventually, I think the killing of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, I think that was something that went too far, that I don't think the Serbian government wanted. I think that was an example of basically one of their terrorist cells doing something that they did not want them to do. The killing of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. But the result was that they did that. France and Russia, that means that any attempt to deal with France and Russia means that you or any attempt to deal with Serbia meant war with France and Russia. And so that's another example of this strategy being used. And the thing is, you could say, well, that's crazy. How could a regime invite war upon itself in the hopes of gains afterwards? Well, we saw what happened with Serbia. It worked, right? Like with China, it worked, right? The war with Japan allowed Chiang Kai-shek to consolidate China. Right, so it literally worked. You can call it crazy as much as you want, but it worked. Okay, until it didn't. Until the Mao and the communists, supported by the Soviets, they took over. But before that happened, before Mao and basically really the Second Chinese Civil War. Not Second Chinese Civil War. It's the Civil War number, probably the 1000th Civil War. But the Civil War that came after World War II. Up to that point, the strategy worked, right? The sort of wag the dog strategy worked. Chiang Kai-shek did succeed in consolidating his hold over China. And similarly, after World War I, Serbia was greatly rewarded by taking over the areas of Bosnia, Croatia, the Vojvodina area, and Slovenia, right? And becoming the state of Yugoslavia. So it worked. So this wag the dog strategy, it works. So anyone saying that it doesn't work or that that's just an absolutely crazy thing, well, the proof is in the pudding. These kinds of things do work. Another example of wag the dog would actually be Bismarck v. France. Now, I don't know as much about that. I know that the conventional history of it is that the conventional history of it is that there was a telegram that was worded in a way to insult the French monarch. And I know people were a lot stuffier back then, but that seems a really, really stupid reason to go to war. My guess is it wasn't that. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. But how he did it, the thing is that I didn't really prepare as much for this stream as I should have. But however he did it, Bismarck did actually get France to declare war on Prussia. And through that war, he was able to, like Chiang Kai-shek did in China, later on, he was able to consolidate, German rule, or excuse me, Prussian control over Germany, and thus, quote unquote, unify Germany. So this strategy works, right? It's not, so you can call it crazy, you can call it an insane idea that a government would try to do that sort of thing. Call it as crazy as you want, but it actually does sort of work. Anyways, we got people on Rumble or whatever. All right. So where are we? What was I talking about? Okay. So I guess what I want to talk about here. Where's my stream? It's over here. So what I guess I sort of had as little preparation as I had. That's sort of what I want to talk about. Oh, here's a funny thing I want to talk about. I guess before talking about the whole Czechoslovakia thing and the Poland thing, I want to talk about just a little funny episode that I thought that a lot of people don't know about. A lot of people don't know about this, but it's actually kind of funny. Okay, here we go. Where are we? So this is from David Leslie Hogan's The Forced War, and this is the Polish passport crisis. And I thought this was a very funny situation. I remember telling my boomer dad about this, and he had a very he didn't say much in response to it, but his reaction was kind of like disconcerted about it. So anyway, considerable attention was given to the problem of encouraging Jewish emigration from Germany in the years from 1933 to 1938. But far more Jews departed from Poland than Germany during these years. An average 100,000 Jews were emigrating from Poland each year compared to 25,000 to 28,000 leaving Germany annually. As because Poland had so many more Jews. From September 33 to November 38, a special economic agreement, the Havar Agreement, enabled German Jews to transfer their assets to Palestine, and the German authorities were far more liberal in this respect than Poland. There were also special blah 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 blah. So 170,000 Jews had left Germany by November 38, compared to approximately 575,000 who had departed Poland during the same years. It was noted that thousands of Jews who left Germany in 33 returned to this country after 34, and that was scarcely the case of the Polish Jews returned to Germany during that same period. Polish ambassador Jerzy Potocki made it clear to the American Undersecretary, blah 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 blah, something Venezuela. Let's get to what's funny about this. Something Jewish lawyers. Poland. Where's the funny thing? Political equality. Believe intermarriage, blah, blah, blah. Negroes in America. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? So... Okay, so where's the funny thing? Oh yeah, so apparently, so Beck's language was unmistakably clear. Apparent to the German, there was no point. Blah, 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 blah. So, see, this is one thing I dislike about Hogan is that he takes so long to get to the fucking point. But basically, what happened was a whole bunch of Polish Jews were given passports to travel to Germany. Right? And then, once their passports expired, it's like, okay, so now time for you Jews that are hanging around in Germany for a while, time for you to go back to Poland, right? You Jews in Germany, it's time for you to go back to Poland. But anyway, the German police decided to bring as many, but basically the Poles said no. Where was it? See, God, Hogan, you're such a bad writer. You're so bad at writing. Although the last day of the issuance of the stamps was not until the new exclusion policy would not take effect on October 30th, the Polish police attempted to prevent the Jews from entering Poland. Right? So the Poles actually put police at their border to stop the return of Jews into Poland because the Jews were trying to get rid of them. The Germans made no preparation for this development, and soon thousands of Polish Jews were pouring into a few small border towns in Upper Silesia and elsewhere. Okay, this was the other. I think this was the Poles shoving Jews into Germany. Right, they're not even doing the passport thing. They're literally just shoving them. They're like rounding a whole bunch of Jews in Poland and then like forcing them into Germany. W.K. Best, the German police official in charge of the operation, declared that the massing of thousands of Polish Jews in a few border towns on the German-Polish frontier, some very disagreeable conditions resulted. The German police decided to bring as many Jews as possible into Poland at night, right? And these were Polish Jews that went into Germany, and the Germans are trying to push them back at night by means of the Green Border, which meant by obscure paths in heavily wooded areas across unguarded meadows. This was dangerous work, right? Because they're basically taking a whole bunch of Polish Jews that don't want to go back to Germany and basically trying to spirit them away back into Poland, right? There was considerable small arms fire from the Polish side, right? Because the Poles are they're actually shooting at these groups, right? Trying to send the Jews back into Poland, right? But no actual engagements occurred between the Germans and Poles along the border. Poland retaliated immediately by driving across the border into Germany small numbers of Jews from Western Poland who had retained German citizenship from World War I. The Polish government issued a decree on the afternoon of October 1938 for the expulsion of enough ethnic Germans from Posen and West Prussia to make up for a discrepancy in the numbers between the two Jewish groups. This Polish act of defiance brought the German action to a halt. It was feared that the Poles, with deliberate exaggeration, would organize vast transports of Germans and exploit the occasion to empty the former Prussian provinces of the remaining German population. Furthermore, Hitler did not like the bitter nature of the affair, and he feared that the German-Polish relations might be wrecked if the incident was not checked. So that was something that happened. These were things that happened. So where are we going? What are we looking at? Where else are we? What else? So that was that's just a little funny episode that I found in in the post. There was also another funny thing that Hogan pointed out in this book. Again, the problem is Hogan's such a bad writer that it's hard to like find where things are. You can't search for things. It's saying so much stuff. But when Joseph Beck, which was like the head Polish diplomat, basically Molotov and Ribbentrop's Polish equivalent, he was visiting the United States, and he was talking to some reporter, and the reporter was having a conversation with them, and he was saying that he was so happy about how Poland stood as a bulwark against German anti-Semitism, right? He was so happy that Poland was standing up against Germany and their ill treatment of the Jews, right? When of course in reality, Poles would send Jews across, out of Poland into Germany, right? And then those Polish Jews in Germany didn't want to leave, right? They kept trying to stay, right? And that was the problem. And the funny thing is that Beck ended up writing in his diary something to the extent of like, Americans are all idiots. Their media and all their information is controlled by Jews, and they have no clue as to the real situations going on. Of course, Beck didn't correct anyone who was saying that, the Poles have this enlightened pro-Jewish attitude. Like he didn't correct them. He just, oh yeah, sure. Anyway, give us arms and money, please, thank you. The Poles probably, they absolutely did. I mean, just the Gates test shows that, right? The Gate, and also another thing is that the Poles were actually rounding up Jews to shove them into Germany. Germany was not doing that, at least not at this point yet. Now later, of course, they did. But at this point, certainly the Poles were like forcibly rounding up Jews and trying to shove them across the border into Germany. Germany was not doing that. And the Polish Jews that went into Germany didn't want to go back to Poland, right? So, yeah, proximity equals hatred, see Kyle. In some instances, depending, So that was just sort of kind of an interesting episode, interesting tangent. Maybe it's sort of illustrative, like if people have like a lot of delusions about about the Nazi regime being particularly anti-Semitic or anything like that. Where are we? But to go back to sort of the wag the dog situation, like one of the biggest myths about World War II is this idea that this idea that Hitler was the one who pushed for taking over Bohemia and Moravia. That he like aggressively pushed and threatened military action to destroy the Czechoslovakian state, and all that. So regarding that, I think the first thing to point out. Um, okay, I guess sort of the first thing to point out. Let's remove this. This is not. There's nothing on there. I think the first thing to point out is that what a lot of people don't know is that actually at Munich, the British offer to Hitler at Munich was actually bigger than what he took. There are certain areas in Moravia that were majority German, that weren't part of the traditional Sudetenland, that were actually majority German, and some areas that were close to majority German, but it was projected that Hitler would that the Nazis would win a plebiscite there, right? Because Nazis were a lot more popular than people retrospectively claim, but Hitler actually backed off. And I don't have the page number for this. I don't have the page number for this because I wasn't like totally prepared for the stream. But yeah, so that's the first thing on that. So Britain actually offered Hitler more than what he took at Munich. The second thing is that post Munich, Britain refused to guarantee Czechoslovakia. Right, there was no guarantee of Czechoslovakia's independence by Britain. Now one could say that the Munich Agreement implied that, but it didn't. There was nothing in the Munich Agreement that said Britain had to come to Czechoslovakia's aid or anything like that. Right, there was no commitment on the side of Britain. Right, it was just saying that Hitler would not, I forget the details of the agreement, but it was just something to do with the fact that Britain would, like Germany, would not, threaten the independence of Czechoslovakia or something. And it's also kind of vague as to what actually happened, whether or not that actually constituted a violation of the Munich Agreement. It's kind of a gray area because Hacha actually went to Berlin and basically like asked to be a protectorate, and you can argue that like if a country comes to you and you offer them and you say, okay, here's the deal, you become a protectorate of Germany, and then they agree to that, does that violate the Munich Agreement? Are you threatening their independence when they travel to Berlin and sign that agreement? Right, so that's why it's actually a gray area. Like in reality, if you were an honest observer, you would say that it's a gray area. But the point is, post Munich, Britain, first of all, refused to guarantee Czechoslovakia. Right, they weren't backing them in any way. And another thing is that the British diplomats were actually encouraging. Let me find something here. Where are we? The British diplomats were actually, how popular were the Nazis in 1935? Like super popular, like incredibly popular. Like imagine if like everyone in the country was a Trump supporter, like that level of popular. So what the British diplomats were doing up to that point, and actually, I think there's something. I actually have something on here. Just not that one, not that one. Oh, it'll be Hogan. It's on page 163. I don't know. I think the problem with trying to read through David Leslie Hogan is that there's so much flotsam in his writing that like it's really hard to get to the point. It takes such a long time to get to the point on stuff. I mean, it's an amazing work, but it just takes forever to get to the point. So this is the Vienna awarded disappointment to Halifax. So like look at how much he goes into. The Hungarians had requested 1,400 square kilometers of territory for Czechoslovakia and Ruthenia. Sihanouk-Ribbentrop guaranteed them 10,000 square kilometers of territory. So, I mean, you can read the book if you want to read the book. But what was happening is that the Brits were actually like were when they would talk to through back channels to the Hungarians or the Poles, they were saying that we're going to let you take what you want. And what Poland particularly wanted was they wanted a border with Hungary, right? They took some territory for themselves, but Poland was actually aggressively pushing for Hungary to get territory, right? Because Poland wanted a direct land connection with Hungary. And I think this has to do with some strategy of Poland of like a Polish-Hungarian alliance or something. But for whatever reason, Polish diplomats really wanted Hungary to get this territory, and the British, they weren't doing anything to deal with the Polish and Hungarian claims. Germany was out of it at this point. Germany wasn't pushing for anything, right? Germany had a hands-off approach, and in fact, according to private communiques, according to David Hogan, this actually pissed Halifax off. Halifax was not happy that Germany was taking such a hands-off approach after they got the Sudetenland. Of course, he wanted, Germany to be aggressive, right? They wanted Germany to be aggressive, but Germany wasn't being aggressive. Poland and Hungary were making noise about wanting territory. Germany was silent. Germany was Hitler was saying, we're satisfied with what we have, right? We don't necessarily want the protectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. And in fact, as I said before, at Munich, he was actually offered some more territory. I think it was sort of in this area here. If you can see my mouse, I think it was sort of in this area here, roughly, that he was also offered that he refused, that he didn't take. He didn't press any further. So Hitler was not playing along the way that Halifax wanted him to play along. So what ended up happening, of course, as we all know, Slovakia broke off. Poland took an area out of Teschen or whatever. Hungary took this big old strip of ethnically Hungarian territory up here. And later, March 1939, they took Ruthenia, or Carpathia, whatever you want to call this little area here. But the thing is, after Slovakia broke off, and as the and I think this was after Hungary took Ruthenia. I forget the order. I forget if Hungary took Ruthenia before or after Bohemia and Moravia, submitted to Germany. I forget the order. They came at pretty almost the same time. But at this point, once Slovakia had broken off, the Czechs actually made a last appeal to the UK for protection, saying, please protect us, please give us some sort of guarantee. We need a major power. We need a major great power guarantee for our independence to remain sort of as a viable state. And the UK said no, and they of course encouraged Hacha to travel to Berlin. In fact, let me find, what is that? What is this? Yes, page 175. I think there's actually something there on that. Page 175. So I think this section is actually, this is 74. Halifax prepared. Yeah, okay, here it is. So, okay. Weisacker discussed the situation with Henderson. The British ambassador complained at Vienna. had encouraged the Slovakian independence. Did yep. I mean, so did Berlin. He also said Austria was largely independent of Berlin, sort of. I mean, that's another subsection. Austria sort of behaving a little bit like an independent country, even though they're not. But anyway, Henderson had no instructions from Halifax to deal with the crisis, but he took a serious step on his own initiative. He contacted Czech Minister Masny March 14th and urged him to suggest that Tchaikovsky should come to Berlin to discuss the situation with Hitler. Right, so this is this is Halifax, right? He's saying, urged him to suggest that Tchaikovsky should come to Berlin to discuss the situation with Hitler. The Czechs responded favorably to Henderson's suggestions. Newton was working closely with Henderson, and he reported from Prague a few hours later that President Hacha and Tchaikovsky had received permissions from the Germans to come to Berlin. The Czech leader left Prague on a special train, March 14, 1939. Subsequent began with the early morphology. A Czech-German agreement was concluded, which provided for an autonomous Bohemian-Moravian regime under German protection. Right? So think about what they're doing. Right? Britain, first off, hands Germany the Sudetenland. They actually, even at Munich, they actually try to give Hitler more than he actually took. Right? They actually tried to give him more, right? And he wouldn't take it even at Munich. Right? Then they're working with, or at least giving, Poland and Hungary, a blank check to do what they wanted with the Czechoslovak state, not backing the Czechoslovak state, right? The Czechoslovak state falls apart, and then at the final hour, once now the Czechoslovakia is sort of reduced to the little rump state of Bohemia and Moravia, right? They're not protecting that, and then on March 14th. Right, when the Czechs are getting really desperate and saying, "Britain, help us," what do the British say? The British say, "Go talk to the Germans," right? So what does it look like the British are trying to do, guys? What does it look like that the British are trying to do? So once you get the gist of it. Why am I getting no donos? I should get I don't expect to get $100 for this shit stream. Whatever. I don't know if Power Chat just isn't working or something. If it's not working, like tell me on either. Well, I'm actually getting quite a few more viewers on YouTube than on Cozy. But anyway. Ooh, Black Pigeon Speaks is watching. Hey, Black Pigeon Speaks. My channel is being suppressed by YouTube for a few years. I'm still making content. Yeah. Actually, I think it'd be cool to have Black Pigeon Speaks come on. Maybe we could have like a stream together with BPS or something. Yeah, maybe. I'd be up to that. I'd be up for that. It's worth noting, Ryan, that the mobilization to present the Czechs with the fait accompli was only decided after the Czechs proposed to come to Berlin. Goebbels revealed this in his diary on March 15th. Okay, HMS Sirius, that's another thing. The Goebbels diaries, the Goebbels diaries are fake. The Goebbels diaries are fucking fake. I mean, okay, this is a bit of a tangent. I'm going sort of off of what I'm going off sort of what I loosely had as a plan for this stream, what would vaguely pass for as a plan for this stream. Ryan, they're not fake. Okay, so tell me if I'm wrong, because again, I'm speaking extemporaneously based on memory of what I've read. But here's what we're to believe. So Goebbels had his diaries. This is the story. Goebbels had his diaries. He wanted to preserve his diaries. So he microfilmed his diaries while he was in Berlin. Traveled to Potsdam. Buried them somewhere in Potsdam. They were then dug up by some guy. I forget if it was a British or a Soviet or American or whatever. So first off, who the hell microfilms their diaries for posterity? That's issue one. So we don't have the originals. If there were, like, assuming like originals were ever found, okay, like, you know,
we're sorry, but your kind isn't allowed here.
Sothis sent $10 test.
Oh, hello.
We're sorry, but your kind isn't allowed here.
GG sent $5 since when were you a Hitler fanatic? Is what you were gay? Is what you said about guess who? Either way, Hitler lost. We need to move on to a better ideology.
Okay, so let me look at the power chats. Events. So this $10 test. Thank you. So this $10 test. Thank you very much. Gigi sent $5. Since when were you a Hitler fanatic? I thought you were gay. I thought you said he would gas you. Either way, Hitler lost. We need to move on to a better ideology. Okay. I'm not saying to, like, be a big fan of Nazi whatever. First off, I don't think there was a Nazi ideology. I also don't think fascism is a thing. So one, I don't think that's even a thing. I don't think there's even such a thing as fascism. All right? Like, I tried reading Evola, I read, so I tried reading Evola as, like, sort of the quote-unquote intellectual foundations of fascism just to figure out what the fuck it even was. A long time ago, I read Mein Kampf, which wouldn't be the intellectual foundation of fascism, but sort of a practical application of what might be fascism in a German setting. And the thing is, I have no clue what it's even supposed to be. All right? Like, I guess it's like, Hitler spends a long time talking about nations and peoples and destinies and how Germans need, space to expand a little bit. Like, he mentions that a little bit, and I'm going to talk about that. That's kind of a canard, the whole living space myth, right? But the point of all of this, like, let me put it this way. When shitlibs were talking about how Saddam didn't have WMDs and Saddam did nothing wrong, at least in a geopolitical sense, you could say that you had some issues with how Saddam managed the regime in Iraq or whatever. That's fine. But, like, but then at the time, like, a whole bunch of, like, Bush conservatives were saying that, oh, you guys just love Saddam Hussein. Or, like, people who are against the war against Persia or Iran today. Like, oh, you just love the mullahs or whatever. You just love Persian Islamic whatever. Or you're against the war in Afghanistan. Oh, you just love the Taliban or something, right? It's retarded. And people are doing that today. Right? People are having, and you're seeing that bullshit today, where people like, I don't know that Douglas McGregor and also Scott Ritter, who's kind of I think Scott Ritter's kind of a piece of shit, and they're saying that no, Russia is in the right on this Ukraine issue. Russia is not. Russia is the tactical aggressor. They're not the strategic aggressor in this situation, and but. Like, and then you see on Twitter all of these NAFO buttholes just going on and on about like how, oh, you just love Putin, you just love Russia. Yes, I love censorship. I love being able to throw people into jail for denying the Holocaust. Yeah, I love that Putin did that. I'm just in love with fucking Putin. I'm in love with Russian domestic policy because I believe they happen to be right on the Ukraine issue. Right? I mean, it's just retarded, right? Or think of it this way, like if I mentioned that, okay, so I don't think the war with Japan was necessary. The war in China did not have to go as long as it did. The extension of the war in China was a function of Western support of Chiang Kai-shek to get him to fight far longer than any Chinese regime had. The embargo on Japan was done in bad faith. Oh, so you're just like in love with imperial Japan or something. right? I mean, it's stupid, right? Like look, I look at Hitler and the Nazi regime as as kind of an autocratic regime in Central Europe at the time, right? And if you were to go into like every single policy, you'd find some things I agree with, find some things I disagree with, right? It's not, and part of the reason for actually posting all of this Hitler stuff is not because like, well, I'm not in love with Hitler, okay, but Hitler is the Satan figure, right? And something that Mike Enoch says a lot when he says, "Why do you talk about the Holocaust, Mike Enoch?" Well, he says, "I care because you care," right? And back if you were to go into like the 1960s or 70s, right? You'd have when Christianity was more of a going concern. Maybe I have to go a bit further back. Maybe I have to go back to the turn of the century, right? You would say like, well, why are you, trying to deconstruct Christianity, if you're in the 1910s, right? Is it because you have some love of paganism? Is it because you have, it's like, no, it's because it's the religion of the day, right? And Hitler is the Satan of the day, right? It's not about promoting whatever the fuck fascism was supposed to be, which I don't think it was even a thing at all. I don't think there is anything you could point to and say that's fascism. I don't think it's a thing, right? I think it's just in Germany you had kind of an autocratic regime, nominally with Hitler having supreme power, though in practice, day to day, not necessarily, but principally, nominally, he had supreme power. And sort of the ethos of the regime was very, traditional, and I guess you'd call it nationalistic, sort of a weird mixture of isolationism, which is kind of weird if you look at sort of what actually happened. To say that they're an isolationist regime will sound crazy to people who look at what happened on the map right later. But temperament. They're a temperamentally isolationist and anti-Soviet regime, right? Anti-communist regime. Okay, so to call that fascism, like I'm not sure, like what does that even mean? Like I don't think fascism is a thing. I don't know. Do people in the comments disagree? Do people in the comments think that fascism is a thing? I don't think fascism is a thing. I don't think, Yeah, Zoomer Historian has great videos on World War II. Zoomer Historian has fantastic videos on World War II. There is just one thing in his videos that I wish he would have. Now, I'm saying this. Now, I haven't done anything like what Zoomer Historian did in terms of properly well-produced videos. So I'm totally peanut gallery on this. I'm not saying, right. This is one thing I kind of get mad at is that when I say, oh, this person is great, he should do this, he should also do this, people go, oh, well, you're saying, well, you haven't done that. Why? You're right. I haven't done that, right? So I just want to make it clear. Huge fan of Zoomer Historian. There's just one like really small thing, is that he doesn't have he doesn't break down what the British did regarding Czechoslovakia well enough, right? Because that's really, really critical. And I think one of the reasons he doesn't do that is because he's influenced a lot by a book. In fact, I have it up right here. And the reason I think he doesn't do that is because of a book. This is Collection of Speeches. This is something that I'm going to talk about regarding word use. Is this it? Is because he's highly influenced by a book. Hitler's Revolution. A very, very interesting book. I really enjoy this book. It doesn't have the depth of Hogan's The Forced War, but it's a lot more readable and well written. Right? It's a much better written book than The Forced War. But one thing one thing that Tedor doesn't do that Hogan does do is point out is going to enough depth regarding British intrigue in Czechoslovakia and the bullshit that the British were doing in Czechoslovakia, right? Because that's huge. Okay, because Czechoslovakia and the quasi annexation of Bohemia and Moravia, that was basically the casus belli for the war. Okay, because that event was used to justify the blank check guarantee to Poland, and now what does Poland become? It becomes Serbia. Poland, once Hitler quasi annexes Bohemia and Moravia, right? That's then used in propaganda. Hitler's on the warpath. Blank check. The British also gave blank checks to Romania, of all countries. That was another bizarre thing. The whole Romanian scare episode. Also to Yugoslavia, but who cares, right? It was Poland. Poland was the country that was showing its butt to Germany. Poland was the country that was doing little border raids. That was trying to shove Jews across the borders. Actually firing. On a few instances, actually fired their anti-aircraft guns at German civilian liners to the point where the Germans actually had to escort civilian liners if they had to fly too close to the Hel Peninsula, and also and also just the occupation of Danzig, right? Because remember, Danzig. Well, anyway, so that's. To get back on track, I'm spiraling off into other things. To get back on track, that's my one criticism of Hitler's Revolution. And I read Hitler's Revolution, and I learned a bunch of stuff from it. There's stuff in it. I don't have the page number off the top of my head, but he talks because they found stuff regarding the statistics on land seizures against Germans in Poland, and that's good because land seizures, that's something that the Poles actually kept records of, right? Of the land that they basically took from German farmers and gave to Poles, right? Land reform that they did, and that's really nice because the thing about pogroms and homicides, and just random killings of Germans in Western Poland. That's something that the Allies denied. That's something that the only people who were actually really effectively documenting it were the Nazis themselves. And so because of that, people then go, oh well, the Nazis say that there were that about 12,000 Germans were killed, from 1919 to 1939. Which isn't that, when you say 12,000 were killed, that sounds like a big number. But remember, this is over a 21-year period, right? So it's going to be less than 1,000 a year, right? But it's just sort of this ongoing simmering provocation that the Poles were doing against Germany. And obviously, what the Poles did against Germany was far greater than 9/11, and arguably I would say in terms of kill count it was much higher than say Pearl Harbor. Now of course Pearl Harbor was an attack on valuable military assets big really expensive capital warships, whereas the Poles they were killing a lot more people, but they weren't really attacking important military targets. They would attack border They would do little just shitty terrorist attacks across the borders. The Polish government would have plausible deniability, but the guys doing it would have Polish military weapons. So it's just that whole stupid thing, right? It's a lot like the Palestinian conflict, where Palestinians would go into Israel, just do shit, right? Just do terrorist shit. They'd have weapons that clearly came from some government entity like Iran, and then but then, like, the PLO would say, "Oh, it's not us. We didn't do it." Same thing with Serbia, right? The Black Hand would have like military grade explosives and blow stuff up, and then the Serbian government would say, "Well, it's not us," right? It's that kind of shit, and that's what Poland was doing to the Germans, into German territory, saying it's not us, saying plausible deniability, right? That's what was happening regarding there. I guess maybe now I should transition into Poland, because I think I've said enough regarding. Czechoslovakia. I haven't said enough, but I said all that I'm going to really say regarding Czechoslovakia. So regarding Poland, though, so one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that Hitler, it's kind of like Nixon in China. Hitler was the first German chancellor to officially recognize the 1919 German-Polish borders. Right? No chancellor up to that point had accepted them. Right? They accepted them de facto as a fact on the ground, but they didn't accept the legitimacy of them. Hitler straight up accepted the legitimacy of the 1919 Versailles borders between Poland and Germany, and he was the first to do so. Right? And what I talked about in another stream is all of the alliance attempts that started once, after 1933, once Hitler didn't have full power, but he was sort of like, I don't know, Hindenburg was kind of like Biden, right? Hindenburg was kind of a potato at that time. So even though Hindenburg was supposedly above Hitler, even then Hitler was basically running the show, sort of. He was more limited in what he could do because he wasn't, the de jure Führer at the time, but he was actually influencing policy more than Hindenburg, even when Hindenburg was supposedly above him. There was also a funny, just an example of this. One time when Hindenburg was sick and he was going into a stupor, and Hitler was visiting Hindenburg as he was dying. Hindenburg kept referring to Hitler as "my lord." Or the German equivalent of "my lord," right? Because that's how far gone Hindenburg was. Hindenburg didn't know, Hindenburg didn't even know what his position was. He was just like, "Oh yes, my lord." and Hitler apparently this is again hearsay history, which I don't really like. But the hearsay history on this is kind of funny. Hitler was kind of looking around, kind of like, "Don't call me that. I'm not your lord," right? I'm not, you're ranked above me, Hindenburg. Okay, but that was, but that's another thing. I really, and this is actually what I've come to is a very. I've come to a conclusion that is actually kind of like radical on history, which is basically that hearsay history should just be outright rejected. And what that would mean is that a big chunk of Hitler's revolution, also a big chunk of Hogan's The Forced War, more of Hogan's The Forced War would be maintained because Hogan sticks a lot more to diplomatic communiques where you actually have which are less likely to be faked, and they're at least some sort of official thing. So Hogan wouldn't suffer as much by this standard as say someone like David Irving. David Irving and AJP Taylor and Martin Gilbert would suffer massively because they use a lot more what I call hearsay history, where they take so-called diaries or interviews after the war of supposed private communications. In fact, Hogan, who I love, but to his detriment, to his unfortunarity, I guess, regarding the discussion, the negotiations with between Hacha and Hitler on March 15th. Hogan repeats the claim that Hindenburg made comments to the extent of, "You need to submit, or we're going to invade you. We plan on invading you." Now, whether that was real or a bluff, according to the hearsay history, even if that hearsay history was true, Goering saying that doesn't mean that that was ever actually part of the plan. That could have just been an intimidation tactic or a bluff, right? Which I personally believe would have been the case. I don't think Germany would have actually gone to war with the rump state of Bohemian Moravia. But even that, but the problem is that's hearsay history. And we also know that, like, if you've ever watched the History Channel on Hacha going to Berlin, right, they tell this really stupid story of Hitler deliberately making Hacha wait. Hitler deliberately makes Hacha wait. And then, he summons Hacha, right? He didn't. First off, what would summoning even mean? Like, Hacha's the head of state, right? What do you mean summoned? I mean, Hitler can call up Hacha and say, "Hey, do you want to come to Berlin and talk about becoming a vassal of the Reich?" I mean, he could do that, but what do you, like, summon? What the fuck does summon mean? Like as if Hitler forced Hacha to arrive in Berlin and then made him wait for several hours. Of course, Hacha himself just says no, that didn't happen at all. I was treated honorably, like a member of state. There was a delay, right? But part of the reason for the delay was because I arrived kind of unannounced, right? But I think there's another reason for the delay. And I have source amnesia on this, and I need to fucking find this. I need to re-find this. But another reason for the delay with Hacha talking to Hitler was that there was a German diplomat in Berlin that was talking to the British, like, attaché in Berlin, and it wasn't Henderson or Halifax, it was some guy beneath them, and basically asked them, what is the British opinion regarding the Czech crisis? Basically asking, what are the British going to do if we, in one sense or another, take over Bohemian Moravia? What are they going to do? And I swear I saw this somewhere, but I couldn't find it in time for the stream. The response was, Britain has no interest in Czechoslovakia at this point. So not only but the thing is, I have source amnesia, so I can't back this at all. But I need to find that so I can back this, because that's another nail in the coffin on this whole Czechoslovakia. Hitler's on the warpath by just gobbling up, Bohemian Moravia. That line, because now we have, one, Britain offers Hitler more than he took at Munich. Two, Britain is refusing to make any kind of guarantee to the Czechoslovak state. Three, Britain is basically telling through back channels to the Poles and the Hungarians, take whatever you want from Czechoslovakia. We're not going to do a thing. We're not going to stand in the way of any Polish or Hungarian claims on Czechoslovakia. The 11th hour, asking for any kind of support of the remaining Bohemian Moravian rump state, then they say, then the Brits say, hey, go talk to Hitler. Now, on top of that, we finally have the German diplomat in Berlin is saying, what's going on? What is your position on the Czechoslovak issue? Do you have any dog in this fight anymore? Are you going to try to preserve it? What would you think if we tried to do something there, right? It was a little bit vague. It didn't actually say protectorate, but like, come on. Like, the British, like, they knew the score, right? The Brits knew what the Germans were going to do if the Brits took a hands-off approach to that, right? And the thing is, like, on all this stuff about Czechoslovakia, like, I'm not telling people that they should be in love with the Reichsprotectorate of Bohemia and Moravia. Right? I'm not saying that you should be happy about that you should be happy that this area was quasi annexed by Germany. I'm not saying that you should be in love with that idea. Okay, that's not the point that I'm making. The point that I'm making is that when you look at everything that happened, this idea that Germany just took it because they're on the warpath to grab territory is not evidenced at all by what happened with Czechoslovakia at all, right? And that's the point. Not that you should be in love with the Nazis finally grabbing that territory. That territory of Bohemia and Moravia just fell into their lap and they took it, right? I mean, I don't think there's any state on the planet that would have a territory, and a fairly rich territory with fairly, the Skoda works and all that, a fairly resource and industrially wealthy territory, would just fall into their lap that you would expect them to reject it. I mean, that's what happened, right? And basically they're saying Hitler's a warmonger because he accepted some territory that fell into his lap because of what the British did. So it's just really, yeah. Germany was far less militarized than everyone thought. Yeah, correct. And Czechoslovakia far more. Maybe. I think the analysis of Czechoslovakia's capacity was largely correct. Would be interested to make an educated guess how well they could have defended. Well, look, as we know in hindsight, the German military was far more capable than anyone thought, including the Germans. Just because they were like a step ahead in terms of doctrine, right? They got the doctrine right at that point in time, when nobody else did, right? And so that's why they were able to defeat Poland as fast as they did, and of course why they were able to defeat France as fast as they did. So, anyway, so where was I? I was talking about like a whole bunch of stuff about what I was going on about. So yeah, where are we? What was it going on about? Okay, I think I was talking about Poland. I think I had finally moved on to Poland. So anyway, Hitler, first chancellor to recognize Poland's borders, right? Kind of like Nixon in China. And I think one of the reasons Hitler could do that was because he had such credibility after the Rhineland event, that he had complete credibility in terms of defending Germany's interests, right? And he had, of course, accelerated Germany's rearmament, and he had done the Rhineland by this point. And so his recognition of the Polish borders, like, it's something he could get away with, kind of like Nixon could get away with opening up dialogue with the Chi-Coms, because Nixon was such a well-established anti-communist generally, or perceived to be as such. So, and that's kind of why Hitler could get away with recognizing the Polish borders. Another thing, and this is something that Hogan mentions, and it's also mentioned in passing in other writings. I think Irving mentions it, A.J.P. Taylor. So they mention this in passing, but they don't highlight it and harp on it. Just how important this is that Hitler actually censored news regarding the treatment of Germans in Poland, right? Which is actually, it was kind of crazy to think about, right? You were saying hi to your newest follower. Yes, pray for Yay 24. I will pray for Yay. I don't believe in Yahweh, but I will pray to Providence. I will pray to Providence for good fortune on Yay. Okay. So Hitler actually censored news coming in from Poland. real news, or yellow journalism, because every country is always going to have yellow journalism and is going to make up atrocities that didn't really happen, right? That always happens. But real or imagined, Hitler was censoring any news coming in regarding the treatment of Germans in Poland. That's big. I mean, and so to say that Hitler had some long-term plan for war against Poland, yet he was deliberately tamping down anti-Polish sentiment in Germany, right? So there's a bit of a contradiction there, right? There's a bit of a split there. Now, obviously, we know Hitler ended up actually going to war with Poland, but the idea that it was part of some longer plan to go to war with Poland, right? First off, you have the alliances. Now, if you want to be, a butthole about the alliance proposals that the Germans kept making to the Poles, you could say, oh, well, that alliance proposal, that was a trick, right? He was just trying to trick them, like he did with Czechia and Munich, right? And that's why you have to deal with the whole Czech situation and how that's not at all what it seems, right? So you could say that. It's like, okay, well, also Hitler is censoring the news and saying, newsmen, you don't report about the treatment of Germans in Poland. Okay, and that's kind of a that's kind of a thing. And in terms of what the Poles did to the Germans, the German minority, and like butthole stuff on the border, like these just provocations. The land seizures of the German minority in Poland. Hogan and Tidor, they both go into the statistics on the destitution of the Germans in Poland and how their unemployment was several times higher than that of Poles. When before then, their unemployment was roughly the same or slightly better than ethnic Poles in that area. So, and of course, the other thing is the Polish occupation of Danzig. I don't exactly remember the timeline, but basically the Poles occupied Danzig like sort of in the weird way that Poles would do these things. Is almost like they would sort of muscle in. Right? It was kind of like with Teschen, like the Teschen area. The Poles would like send like, not like, a full proper like army corps in, but they would send like, 5,000 guys in, and just sort of muscle into an area and then like just start, telling people in the area what to do. Just sort of this weird like not like the normal way where a military goes into an area, beats the army, and then establishes a military government. It wasn't like that. It was this weird sort of muscling in that the Poles did in Teschen, and they also did that at Danzig. So now the issue with that alone. Now, along with all of the stuff that the Poles were doing the German minority and all of like the little, plausible deniability nuisance rate across the borders, that was all. On top of that, you then had the Polish occupation of Danzig. Now, the thing about Danzig is that Danzig was an independent state. Right? People sort of forget this. Like they could say Danzig's status was a little bit in limbo, and in fact it was. But de jure, it was an independent country, right? Under the supposed protection of the League of Nations. But Danzig was an independent country. An independent country whose independence was guaranteed by Germany. And then the Poles move in and take over Danzig. Now, if anyone wants to deny, like people, like I could see people denying that the Poles took over Danzig because the Poles never abolished like the Danzig government. But I don't know. If you want to know the reality of the Poles taking over Danzig, like during the German invasion of Poland, one of the first areas where fighting broke out was in Danzig. Right, they were street fighting in Danzig to drive the Poles out of Danzig. Right, so I think that the fact that the Poles were in control of Danzig, the proof of the pudding is found it becomes undeniable when you actually look at where the fighting actually happened. Right, Danzig had to be wrested from the Poles militarily in the invasion because the Poles occupied it. Right. And I know people who have watched World War II documentaries, they see that clip of like the armored car of like the Heimwehr, which was sort of this like paramilitary unit that was supported by the Nazis, firing at a building that was occupied by Poles in Danzig, right? Even though Danzig was supposedly an independent country, yet they're having to fight the Poles in Danzig, right? So that's so denial of Polish occupation of Danzig is just retarded, right? Anyone who says that is just dumb, or dumb or just lying. So that was another thing. So that alone, like that's, like people talk about, they say, well, Britain guaranteed Poland, and then Hitler went to war with Poland, and so he knew what he was doing. It's like, okay, well, Hitler can make the same case about Danzig, right? Hitler guaranteed Danzig, Poland invaded Danzig, right? I mean, the parallels to Serbia are just pop out at you, right? But here's another thing which sort of deals with the myth that Hitler had like some long premeditated plan for war with Poland, right? Along with censoring the news coming from Poland regarding maltreatment of the Germans. Also, regarding the maltreatment of the Germans, we can't get any non-German record to quantify the scale. Obviously, the Poles were never going to do it. But what we do have is some journos. This is a weird situation where journos are actually useful, providing some useful information. Is that there was at least an American journalist. There was at least an American journalist that was on the ground, sort of in the Posen area, and he gave a qualitative confirmation of what the Nazis were saying. Now, he's just one guy, right? He can't tell you the scale of the killings and the pogroms and just groups of like Polish militia rounding up Germans and marching them off of their land, right? But he was describing that happening qualitatively. He was describing that this is happening where I am. Of course, he can't say how much it's happening. He can't say how common this is. But what he did say is this is happening where I am. And also there, you look at from Hogan's writing, with Henderson talking to Halifax. Excuse me. Henderson's talking about how the German claims regarding the maltreatment of the Germans in Poland are substantiated. They're not fabricated. They're not made up. So this is what's happening in like private, diplomatic communiques between Halifax and Henderson. Is Halifax is saying, yeah, this actually is happening. So we know that at the highest levels, at least among the diplomatic corps, the Brits knew that this was true. That the Germans weren't. That the Germans, at least they weren't completely making it up. It's possible that they were exaggerating the extent, but I don't think they were even exaggerating the extent. I really don't. And the reason I don't think they were exaggerating the extent is because the Germans were taking records and documenting these events during the period in which Hitler was censoring news of any of this. So Hitler was censoring it, but he was allowing whatever it was, some German bureau. You can find it. You can find it somewhere. This is the issue with this stream and not being properly prepared, is I don't have all these sources on hand. But the reason I think that they weren't exaggerating it is because at the time they were collecting most of these records, Hitler didn't have a policy to gin up hatred against the Poles, right? So the next thing is Hitler's delayed invasion. Now, the invasion of Poland once Hitler actually decided to go to war with Poland, the slated date, the original date for the invasion was August 26th. Now, as you know, the invasion actually occurred on September 1st. The reason for that is because, and another thing people don't realize is that the Poles actually mobilized before the Germans. So the German mobilization was actually in response to the Polish mobilization. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that for Germany to not invade Poland, that would just basically mean indefinite mobilization as long as Poland wanted to mobilize, right? So that was another shitty thing that the Poles were forcing Germany to do, right? Because if the Poles are mobilized and the Germans aren't, then the Germans are kind of vulnerable. So the Germans have to mobilize, right, in response. So that's another thing on the list of the shitty things that the Poles are doing to make the Germans' lives difficult. But anyway, Hitler was delaying the invasion, and the reason he was delaying the invasion was because he was getting these last-minute feelers from Poland offering some sort of settlement regarding the Danzig issue. And he did this, and he ended up delaying the invasion for 7, 8, 9, 30, 31, for 6 days. He ended up delaying it for 6 days. All right. And this was actually, and in Manstein's book, Lost Victories, Manstein talks about this, and he talks about how aggravated all the generals were at Hitler's delays of the invasion, right? Because they were ready to go on August 26th. And what Hitler's delays did was it made it easier for the Poles to anticipate the vectors of the attack. All right, and so Manstein was saying, look, pull the trigger or don't, right? Stop faffing about. Either you want us to invade Poland, let us invade Poland. The longer you delay, the more that advantages the defender, because they'll begin to develop a better idea of where our formations are and where and what our attack plan is designed to be. So Hitler is delaying the invasion to the detriment of its military capabilities. And I think the cherry on top of all of this, that Hitler did not have some great plan to invade Poland, was that on September 2nd, right, 1 day into the invasion, Hitler was proposing a ceasefire with the Poles. Right? And now, of course, as we know, the Poles said no. And part of that, and this is something that Hogan goes into, and it's also something that Buchanan points out, is that the Poles greatly overestimated their ability to hold off the Germans. Right? So what the Poles were doing actually makes a lot of sense if you look at what Serbia did in World War I, right? Because after Serbia, after World War I, Serbia was granted a huge amount of territory, right? And what Hogan also goes into is how Polish thinking was that we can get way more territory pushing west against Germany. Now that's going to mean we have to hold out against the German invasion, but Germany's going to be facing a two-front war. We can hold out. Our army is good enough to hold out, and that was their thinking. They thought that they could hold out against Germany, not that they could single-handedly defeat them, but that they could hold out long enough for the West to launch their offensive, and ultimately, and then Poland would gain a whole bunch of territory at Germany's expense. Now, in a very roundabout way, they did, right? But of course, they had to be a vassal of the Soviet Union, which I don't think any of them would have taken that trade at the time. But that was their thinking, and that was their goal, and that is why they chose war with Germany and put Germany in a position where they had to attack. Now, why did they have to put Germany in a position where they had to attack instead of just attacking themselves? Well, they needed Western support, right? And the West isn't going to support a Poland that attacks Germany, right? Because now Germany's just defending themselves and all that, so they have to make it look like Germany is attacking Poland, even though Poland, is basically occupying Danzig, and so in a sense, Poland actually did attack first, but like that's it. But that's kind of a. I mean, that's a technical truth that they did kind of attack first, but really what they did was do a whole bunch of nasty shit that forced Hitler to attack. So, so that is sort of and Zoomer Historian has a great video called like the true origins of the start of World War II. And like I said before, the one thing that it's missing, and it's the same thing that Richard Tedder's book is missing, is a proper is they don't go into it as much depth on what the British did in Czechoslovakia than I would like them to do. And of course, maybe that's something that I should do. Maybe I should do a video talking about the origin of World War II with more of what I think is a proper focus on British intrigue in Czechoslovakia, including the source that I need to find. I need to go get again on the British diplomat in Berlin telling the German diplomat in Berlin that the Brits have no interest in Czechoslovakia. So that's just what I wanted to talk about. Oh, another thing, it's just sort of an incidental thing. Let me find back to the display. Let's go again. This will be on page 188. I thought this was kind of interesting. I'd be interested in finding more of these things, but like one thing regarding the Holocaust is the usage of words. Here we go. Hitler frankly admitted that the intervention of Chamberlain and Daladier had deflected from him his purely political solution of the Czech problem. This solution, quote, would have been tantamount to a liquidation of Czechoslovakia. Now, if you have read anything regarding the Holocaust and Holocaust revision debates, you know that the meaning of this word matters a lot, right? What does liquidation mean? I also have source amnesia for another thing, which is where Hitler describes, like after the Battle of France, again, this is unfortunate, I have source amnesia on this, is that Hitler describes France as having been annihilated, right? So, which is important because it gives us an idea, because we know what Hitler did with France, right? We know about the invasion, the occupation of the North, and the Vichy regime. Hitler describes what was done with France as an annihilation of France, right? And now he's describing, largely a scenario similar to what happened in Czechoslovakia as a liquidation of Czechoslovakia. So what happened to Czechoslovakia was a liquidation. What happened to France was an annihilation. So we have two instances where what the term liquidation and annihilation are referring to is very well known. And in both of these instances, it does not mean the extermination of the entire Czechoslovakian population or the extermination of the entire French population. So those two instances, and I'm sure there's many more instances of the use of the term liquidation and annihilation, which give us insight into, what is meant by those terms and the implications of that with the Holocaust. Okay. So I guess for the next thing on my little stream that I want to do is, where are we? I thought this was kind of interesting. Obviously, this is a fairly limited thing to do. So I looked at, because I thought about doing this when I actually had a conversation. I actually called my boomer dad, and we talk all the time, and so I called him, and and we ended up talking. Somehow the conversation went on to like Hitler and stuff, and I was telling him about what Hitler was doing with Poland. And my dad said, well, if what you say is true about Poland, then where was Hitler going to get the Lebensraum? Where was Hitler going to get the living space? And I thought that was interesting, and that kind of dawned on me that was actually a big thing, because I'm reading Hogan, right? This is at this time, and I'm reading a bit of Tedor and Hitler's Revolution, and like, oh yeah, that's right, like living space. Like that's supposedly like a big thing that Hitler was into, right? That was like a big, right? So what I did is I looked at two things. I looked at Mein Kampf, and then I looked at this other this thing, which is a Hitler's collection of speeches. It's a lot of speeches. Adolf Hitler collection of speeches. It's not necessarily every single speech that Hitler did, but it's a lot. And also the people who collected these speeches said that these are like the important speeches, so I'll take their word for it. But anyway, so what I did is I went to this site called Count Words Free just to see how many times does he use certain terms. So this is from, what is this? This is from the collection of speeches. And this isn't hearsay history. This isn't like, oh, I had a private conversation with Hitler and he said this, right? And that's something that David Irving does a lot of, right? Which I don't appreciate, right? Now, of course, that's actually very radical opinion and would actually that would actually like invalidate like a huge chunk of history books that have been written, right? Because what I'm saying is that, like, yeah, David Irving, like, 2/3 of what you use is basically stuff that we can't use because it's hearsay, right? It's a man saying he talked to Hitler who said whatever. But here we have Hitler's speeches and we have Mein Kampf. Nobody can say that this wasn't stuff that he actually said or wrote, right? This is, this is solid stuff. We know Hitler said this. So, okay, so let's look at the actual terms that he used, right? And we're also not doing like secret speeches. I remember, like, that's one thing that people use as evidence of the Holocaust, is Himmler said he was going to do it or he was doing it in a secret speech. Like, what the fuck is a secret speech? Like, what are you talking about? Like, it's retarded. Anyway. So this is from Hitler's collection of speeches. The number one term is German. Number two is Germany, people, national. And I used 6 characters. Now, using 6 characters is limited because certain proper nouns like Ruhr is 4 characters, but that is a proper noun. So some important proper nouns will be excluded, but we won't have the word the in there or a in there. But you can see some terms. Against, that's not a proper noun. Nation is pretty generic. Before, because, whatever. So socialist is at 0.2%. Hitler, referring to himself at 0.1%, 612 times. Struggle, 567. Europe. And then we have however, should, government, cannot, future, believe, political, history, right? So we have a bunch of these kind of generic terms. But then we get down to sort of the more so the point I'm looking for is I'm not even looking at a living space. I'm just looking at how many times the word living was used. Well, here it's 111 times. So what are some terms that we use more than the term living? Not even living space. This is just living, right? So living space is going to be less than this. But let's just how many times does he use the term living? All right. And let's compare that to some other terms. Polish uses more. American uses more. He refers to Churchill more than he uses the word living. Okay. Historic, gigantic campaign. Bolshevism. Right, so he's talking about Bolshevism a lot more. He talks about Volksgemeinschaft. Not exactly sure what that means. Let's see. He refers to socialism more than living. He refers to socialists more than living. He refers to Jewish a bit more than living, right? He refers to Versailles a lot more than living. He refers to Reichstag more than living. He refers to Providence, right? Quite a bit. And I think the reason he refers to Providence so much is because he's actually an atheist. So when he wants to make some spiritual appeal, he'll say God, but that doesn't. But to the extent that he's actually expressing his own pathos, he's got to say something spiritual. He has to say Providence because he doesn't believe in God, which I believe is true. He refers to Poland a lot more than living. What else? Here's another proper German term. I don't know what this means. People's Genossen. So British, all right. Wehrmacht refers to the army a lot more than living. So there's like a whole bunch of terms that refers to a lot more stuff than living. There's also like some blog post that I saw, which actually says that Hitler used the term, the proper the phrase living space 7 times. This is the speeches, but he used the term living space 7 times in Mein Kampf in 3 separate sort of sections. And that kind of calls into question just how important it was, because you look in the West, when they're describing the Nazi regime, they're describing living space as a huge thing in terms of the Western description of Hitler. But when you actually go into, like, at least in the words usage, which I get, England he uses a lot more. When you actually go into the word use, even just the term living, not even living space, is way down the list. He spends way more time talking about He spends way more time talking about socialists, although that National Socialists, so maybe don't. But I saw down here he talks a lot more about Bolshevism than he talks about Jews, right? Or at least uses that term more in his speeches. So let's take a look at Mein Kampf. This is Mein Kampf. So let's go here and let's take a look at living. So living, he refers to that 69 times. What does he refer to more than living? He refers to fatherland more than living. Okay, although you could say those might be related. What else does he use more than living? He refers to democracy more than living. So, in all likelihood, his critiques of democracy are probably more common than his reference to living space, almost certainly. He refers to the city of Munich more than he uses the term living, let alone the phrase living space, right? He refers to Austria more. He refers to Marxism more. He refers to Marxist more. Right. He refers to Germans more. He refers to France more. He refers to racial more. Okay. He refers to socialist more, but again, that could also refer to National Socialist. He does refer to Jewish more. He does refer to Jew, and you could say he refers to Jewish more than he refers to, France. 100 mentions of France, 135 mentions of Jewish. All right. Did I miss England? Okay, he only refers to England 91 times. Okay. But that's kind of it. He refers to France more than he refers to England. But yeah, so that's something that a lot of people have said is that the emphasis on living space is much more of a thing in terms of Western descriptions of Nazi Germany. Oh, that's another thing. Gleiwitz. Gleiwitz is another example of of Westernisms on the Nazi regime. In the speech that Hitler gave, like right after the invasion of Poland, in that speech, which was a public speech that was meant for public consumption, he doesn't mention Gleiwitz at all. Right? He doesn't mention Gleiwitz at all. And the thing is, once you know about like the stuff that the Poles were doing, like the occupation of Danzig and fire on civilian transports and just like the just sporadic abuses of the German minority and the land seizures. Once you know about all that, then it becomes like just really then this idea that the Germans were going to use that they were going to stage the Gleiwitz event for the invasion of Poland is just retarded, right? Especially when you know that the planned invasion was August 26th, not September 1st, which is when the Gleiwitz incident actually occurred. So the idea that the Germans were going to stage that and then try to use that as a paper-thin, justification to invade Poland is ridiculous. It's just absolutely absurd, and it's even more absurd by the fact that Hitler didn't even do that. He didn't even cite Gleiwitz as a reason to invade at all. That's just something that's just the West just said that. They just made that up, right? The importance of Gleiwitz was completely made up by the West, right? Hitler literally does not mention it in his speech before in his speech just after the invasion of Poland. So it really, like, the more you like research on this, the more you find it's just the whole narrative on like Nazi aggression and the reasons for these wars, for like this sort of compound collection of wars. It just falls apart, like, absolutely. And and I was thinking about like Putin when he was talking to Tucker Carlson, right? And I think what happened when Putin was talking to Tucker Carlson is Putin got a little bit too comfortable. And he was getting a little bit too conversational. And he wasn't filtering his thoughts as the interview went on. And so as a result, he ended up saying, oh, yeah, Poland forced Hitler to attack, right? So, and Putin said that. And so I think Putin, and who says that? Who says Poland forced Hitler to attack? The kind of person who says that is somebody who knows a lot about the kind of stuff that I've been talking about. That's who says that, right? The stuff that I've been saying here about Poland, agitating and forcing Hitler to attack, that, surface level counterintuitive position, the people who hold that position know a lot of what I've basically said on this stream here. So when Putin says that, that's not just some random statement that some crazy man makes, right? That there's a lot of background knowledge that goes into leading to that conclusion, right? Because if you just look out on a map and you just listen to Western or Soviet propaganda about the Great Patriotic War, that's not an intuitive conclusion to come to. It looks like Germany is just out of the blue attacking Poland and being an aggressive expansionist, blah, 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 right? So Putin knows what I'm saying here. Putin, so I think that's kind of interesting. You have a major head of state who knows what I'm saying is true. Now, unfortunately, Putin can't go too far with it because the Great Patriotic War is a fucking religion in Russia, right? So Putin can't say too much truth about that, because if he says too much truth, then he's basically undermining one of the key religious events in Russian history, which is the glorious battle against the Nazis who wanted to enslave the Slavs or whatever. Ignoring what Hitler's terms were to the Soviets. That's another weird thing. Is people just don't know what Hitler's terms were. Right? They just don't frickin' know what Hitler's terms were to the Soviet Union. They imagined that there were no terms. I don't know. I guess they thought that Hitler's plan was to just fight the Soviet Union all the way to Vladivostok or something. It's bizarre what people think, and they don't know that that Hitler's terms. And there were multiple talks, and they took place in Stockholm. These were the Stockholm talks, and the terms that Hitler was pushing on Stalin was basically a return to the Brest-Litovsk line, which was basically Germany occupies the Baltic states, Belarus, and Ukraine, right? Pretty close to the modern borders of Russia today, was what Hitler was pushing was pushing on the Soviet Union. So this idea that it was Hitler was destined for a war to the end, simply not true. Not true at all. It feels like many Western leaders think history begins in 1945. No, it's more like Western leaders think that history begins in 1936, roughly. I think that's kind of when they think it begins, right? The foundational myth of the anti-white religion, sort of. The Nazi regime, I think the Nazi regime, the myths of the good war myth, right, and the aggressive maniac Hitler myth, that was a foundation that I would say laid the groundwork of the anti-white myth, right? Because there's all sorts of myths about Hitler and the Nazi racial ideas. Right, which were just massively bogus. There was the myth that the Nazis viewed Slavs as subhuman. Not true at all. If you look at any official documents of who the Nazi Party officially considered to be Aryan, it included all Slavs. It included Russians. Right. So this idea that now Hitler would refer to would refer to Bolshevism. Right. He would refer to Marxism. He would, and that there's another thing is the subhuman myth. But the thing is, when there are several examples of Hitler referring to subhumans, right, where he called people subhumans. One of which was he referred to those Spaniards fighting on the side of the Republicans. He referred to them as subhumans, right? Whereas the Spanish who fought on the side of Franco, they were whatever. They were the brave and noble Spanish soldiers fighting for the proud traditions of Spain or whatever, right? So we have instances of where, kind of like with liquidation and annihilation, right? Oh, we have annihilated France. We have annihilated Poland. We have liquidated Czechoslovakia, right? So very concrete examples of how those terms are being used and what they mean. And we also have a very concrete example in Spain where Hitler is referring to the Spanish Republicans as subhumans. I think there's also examples of Hitler referring to elements within German society itself as subhuman, right? So the term subhuman, that's not a term that's that's ascribed like blanket to like Slavs or something, right? That's never how it was used, at least not officially. Now you could have now the problem with this is that when you actually have war, like people say shit like today, like even today in the Russia-Ukraine war, you have Ukrainians referring to Russians as orcs over and orcs. I mean, that's basically a synonym for subhuman. Okay, but like, okay, so what do you think that means? Like Ukrainians are referring to Russians as orcs. What do you think that? What it means is that they're fighting a war with them, and because they're locked in a war with them, they really don't like them. That's what it means. Okay, and so when you have Germans who are fighting this a horrific war against the Soviet Union, and you have guys on the field, you have even like certain higher level officers referring to the Russians as subhumans. Okay, that's kind of like the Ukrainians referring to the Russians as orcs, you know, and it's not good. I'm not like defending it or whatever the fuck that would mean. What I'm saying is it's just a reality of war. Okay, that's what I'm saying. So anyways, that's the extent of my stream now. I blocked Zoomer Historian's channel and installed YouTube ad block. Why would you block Zoomer Historian's channel? I don't know why. What do you have against Zoomer? I think his videos are all like all really good. I mean, I've given my very limited critiques of Zoomer Historian's channel, but I don't know why you would block it. I think it's one of the best channels on YouTube. I think it's a fantastic channel. You know, I just got here. Start over. I just got here. Start over. Okay. Hitler, not as bad as people say. There you go. If it's good, I'll unblock. You should unblock it. It's a really good channel. Like I watch his videos and like, and you know how good his channel is. I'll watch his videos, and he'll be saying stuff, and like 98% of the time, it's like me talking, right? And so if you define good as whatever Ryan would say, whatever Ryan Falk would say, which I do. You know, good is whatever I would say. Obviously. How could anybody think anything else? The Zoomer Historian's channel is going to be great, right? So yeah, there you go. I never heard of him until this stream. Yeah, great channel. Yeah, it's good. Go watch Zoomer Historian. Fantastic channel. Wow, then it must be really good. Yes. I think Ryan should take a page of Aiden Paladin and make a 1000% autistic scripted video and then post it and then be in the chat to comment on the dumb shit we comment on. Yeah, that's something to do. So anyway, what do I stream about now, guys? I'm kind of run out of content here. Oh, here's another thing I could recommend. Here's another thing I would recommend is this page here. It's literally Hitler'sPeacePlans.com, and this is something that I've wanted for a long time, and I've only found it recently, which is basically a compilation of all of Hitler's peace proposals before the war, and a lot of the stuff that we've covered up to this point, and is covered, and I think better in Hogan and Tedor. But later on, when we get into the war itself, this is a great collection, and it's a great pithy collection of Hitler's peace proposals. All right. So this is one, for example. Here's one: October 26, 1939. Public opinion throughout the world. New plan for the pacification of Europe. Stuff here. Okay, Adolf Hitler meets with the U.S. Undersecretary of State Summer Wells. Hitler made 5 points. He had long been in favor of disarmament, but received no encouragement from England, France, or the United States. This is true. This is true. Hitler had proposed, disarmament amongst all like the great powers. Of course, they didn't agree. He states that he's in favor of international free trade. Germany has no aim other than the return of the German people to homeland. Blah blah blah. He had no desire to control non-German people and no intention to interfere with their independence. He wanted the return of the colonies that were stolen from Germany at Versailles. This he's saying to Undersecretary of State Sumner Welles. I don't Hitler sporadically in his proposals would demand colonies, would demand the return of the old overseas colonies. But frankly, I think Hitler would just use the claims on those lands as a bargaining chip for stuff he really wanted, which was in Europe. I don't think Hitler had his eyes on those colonies ever, really. But there was one. Yeah, I would just recommend reading through this. Okay, here we go. Late May, through Sweden proposes peace terms to Britain. And here we go. This is where he gets some points. Hitler's peace proposal is as follows. The British Empire retains all its colonies. Germany's position on the continent will be unquestioned. All questions regarding the Mediterranean and its French, Belgian, and Dutch colonies are open to discussion. A Polish state must exist. The former Czechoslovakian states remain independent but under German protection. Right? So this is, we're going to maintain, the protector Bohemia and Moravia. That's what he's saying. Eckenberg understands this to imply that the states occupied by Germany would be deoccupied. Germany's occupation was only due to the present war situation. Once again, Churchill's not interested in making peace. There's somewhere where he more explicitly comes out and says we're going to evacuate the West. This is Hitler's final testament. Huh. Maybe I remember the book In Himmler's Secret War. They might actually have some better stuff than this. Because I remember in Himmler's Secret War, they actually have proposals where Hitler just outright says, like, we're going to evacuate the entirety of the West. We'll pull out of the Low Countries, Denmark, Norway, and France in toto, right? And a Polish state must exist. We'll reconstitute a Polish state, right? So maybe this isn't as good as I thought it would be, because there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of words here, a lot of unnecessary words. When what people really need and what was really needed for the propaganda, when what is really need to fight the propaganda war is like hard bullet point. What is Hitler proposing, right? As opposed to all these diplomatic intrigues and inferences. Because when you have these intrigues and inferences, like anyone who's skeptical can just use that to say, oh, it's all just a trick, right? So you need hard and fast proposals, right? That's what you need. Anyway, the world without World War II would have space colonies by now. Maybe, possibly. Certainly, World War II was a highly, highly dysgenic event, I would say. So, I'm looking at two different chats. I'm looking at the Cozy chat and the YouTube chat. So Cozy, but YouTube is like almost twice as big as Cozy. You're wrong about alternative hypothesis. You're wrong about Hindenburg. Go look up what my lord means in German. Well, okay. I will do that. Let's see. What does my lord mean in German? Make sure I'm streaming the right thing. Can Flavius Adius, can you link me to something on that? Because when I look up what my lord is in German, it's basically just a translation. It's just like how to translate my lord into German. So So I would prefer to know. Cozy is still a thing. Yeah, Cozy is still a thing. I mean, there's like I'm getting 130 something views. Paul Town's getting 186 views. Like it's not like obviously it's declined, but anyone who says it's dead is I mean that's just not true at all. I mean obviously my YouTube is way bigger than Cozy now, but it's not it is far from dead. That's just not true at all. If you type my lord, it gives mine hair. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Who was the Polish Becker guy you mentioned? Beck. Ludwig Beck. Polish diplomat. Here, let me find. I mean, you can find a Wikipedia on him. I think it's was it Ludwig Beck? Ludwig Beck, Polish diplomat. Wait, no, that's a German guy. That's a German guy. Let's just look up Beck, Polish diplomat. Joseph Beck. Sorry. Sorry. This would be Joseph Beck. Joseph Beck was a Polish statesman who served in the Second Polish Republic as a diplomat and a military officer. Closely associated with Joseph Pilsudski, Beck was famous for largely setting the Polish foreign policy. He tried to fulfill Pilsudski's dream of making Poland a leader of a regional coalition, but he was widely disliked and distrusted by other governments. He was involved in territorial disputes with Lithuania and Czechoslovakia. With his nation became two large hostile powers, Germany and the Soviet Union. Beck sometimes pursued accommodation with them and sometimes defied them. Well, yeah. He attempted to take advantage of mutual antagonism, but then formed the alliance with the United Kingdom and France. Both declared war on Germany after the formation of Poland, and after the Soviet Union invaded Poland, Beck and the rest of his government evacuated to Romania. That's Beck. That's Mr. Beck. Ryan, make a Discord or session group or something. I don't know. I don't really know. Read the Wikipedia. Well, the problem is the rest of the Wikipedia article. I don't know. I don't really trust Wikipedia on anything World War II, right? Because they're going to say, you know, Beck heroically and defiantly stood against Nazi aggression or some shit like that. I can't really be arsed. Especially what we know about Wikipedia and who their editors are and how like their editors are like there's all a bunch of troons that have taken over the editorial boards of Wikipedia and how they're like modifying articles all over the place and like removing information and how they took cultural Marxism, which was like a real thing, and then call it the cultural Marxism conspiracy theory. You have enough power level to know who Ryan Falk is. I don't really use the internet, said the user account. I listen to Ryan while I work, lol. At the start of the stream, some autists were raging that a man who was once gay dared to stream on Cozy. And yet Nick, Nick. That's what's something weird thing about these guys. Like, guys, and they just don't get it. Like, there's a certain group of groypers. It's not all groypers, but a certain group of groypers who don't get it. Look, if you're gonna go on and attack somebody and say, "Hey, you're a sodomite, you're a fag, you're a faggot," right? If they're gonna come in and they're gonna say that, like you need to understand that people are going to hit back and point out that Nick is almost certainly gay, right? Based on all the circumstantial evidence about him, right? His speech and his mannerisms is more leaning gay than mine, okay? And they're not going to, and people are not going to indulge your delusion that he's not. Right? When you start attacking a person and saying you're a bad person because you are a homosexual or something, something to that effect. Okay, well, the people who you're saying that to, right, they might be polite. Like, if you don't do that, people tend to be polite and just don't mention Nick's homosexuality at all, right? Because it's not a deal. It's not a big deal. Like most people don't care that he is, right? Like they literally, it's so unimportant. It's so they don't care that they don't bring it up as long as you don't bring it up, right? But as soon as you make it an issue, okay, now it's an issue. Now it's something that you care about. Well, they're like people are, and certainly I am going to respond properly, right? So, and they're not going to indulge, right? They're not going to pretend otherwise. They're not going to like you have this idea that he's not, right? They're not just going to like respect that or be polite or anything like that, right? So that's how it's gonna. That's just how that goes, right? And then of course it goes into like a circle. Right? Somebody goes like, "Oh, Ryan, you're gay. I'm not listening to you because you are gay." Like, okay, well, I'm gonna point out that Nick is gay, and then someone else comes in and goes, "Why are you out of the blue attacking Nick for being gay when guess what? You're gay. Can you believe that?" Like, and they just don't fucking get it. They don't get what they're doing. They don't get the pointlessness of what they're doing. They're just idiots. And of course, it's not all the Groypers. It's just a minority of them, right? I mean, there's like streamers who are like fans of America First, and they get pissed off by a lot of the really shitty Groypers that Nick attracts, right? So, and that's sort of why, like, I still stream on Cozy because it's not all. It really is Naxalt, and so whatever. That's all that is. Toss. This is so dumb, and it hurts his credibility on everything else. Ryan is very straight passing. Yeah, a lot are, right? There's quite a few people that are very, very straight passing. The expanders are gay. I don't see that. Well, okay, fine. Gays want other people to be gay. No, they don't. They really don't. You don't. No, that's just something that you made up. Stop. They don't. It's not true at all. Shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. Nick has respect for Ryan. I don't see where the hostility came from unless it is. It's a fucking Groyper. It's not Nick. Right? Nick's not pushing any of this. Nick's not making a big deal out of any of this. Right? He's not. Right? It's these shitty little low-level Groypers who keep coming in. And you know what? To my shame, I'm responding to them when I shouldn't. Right? That is my fault. I shouldn't be responding to them. So yeah, that is on me. Right? But whatever. They're making me gay. So I'm out of content. What do you guys want me to do? Should I do something, guys? I'm looking at YouTube, and I'm looking at not looking at Rumble. There's 9 people on Rumble. There's 5 people on Kick. All right. So I'm really looking at YouTube and Cozy. So what do I play Victoria 2? Asexual type 2. I'm a 70-year-old grandmother, and I'm just not interested in sex anymore. I think I might be asexual. Well, I mean, yeah. Like a lot of people, when they reach that age, they become asexual. AGI is real, and we already achieved it and being kept under wraps. I've thought about that, about AGI being real. And I also have a suspicion that it's a lot easier. What did Hitler have to say about Ireland? I have nothing in my brain to know what he said about Ireland. You can read Mein Kampf or go through Hitler's collections of speeches and do like a Control F Ireland to see what he says about Ireland. I don't. Hitler was a fan of the British in general, which he should not have been. Right? That's funny. That's another thing. Putin and Hitler. Putler. Putin in his interviews with Tucker and in other instances, Putin has started to say recently that one of the big mistakes that he made as president, right? Well, he's actually kind of in a similar situation in Russia as Hitler was in Germany, and he says that one of the big mistakes that he made was trusting the West, which was a similar situation that Hitler made in trusting Britain, right? So the parallels, right? Poland, Ukraine, right? Both being used the same way against the targeted state, Russia, Germany, both like dictators of the state, trusted the West way more than they should have, right? Both being goaded into a war, right? Both being maneuvered into the attack. So, Ryan, what's your Kick channel? I have it. I linked it on the Twitter. Yeah, it's Kick Donserly. What does it say? Oh, it still says Stardew Valley with noobs, the people. It's still the name of another stream. See, this is why like people ask, why don't you restream on all these places? Because I have to manage all these other streams, and I always mess up, and I always get the titles wrong. I don't think people really care. I don't think people really care at all about it. So, yeah. Anything with Destiny is bad optics. Oh, definitely. Definitely. I mean, anything like Destiny, are you kidding? Where is Destiny? Yeah. I mean, it's like I mean, I'm pretty extreme, but I don't know about Destiny. Like, here's the Destiny system right here. Destiny's form of debate. This is basically sort of I think experts agree that this is basically how Destiny wants to debate stuff. Damn hit, right? So this is Destiny's system. Now, one thing I had is that Destiny actually I don't know if you can believe it. But I kept posting to Destiny on a Twitter page, and I kept posting.
We're sorry, but
that
your kind isn't allowed here.
Oh, hey man, where are all the old articles you can use about race that we use on your website? Archive.org. They're still there on archive.org. And another thing is that those articles are, I mean, they're better than anything I post now. But like I don't know, I don't really have a whole lot of attachment to my old content that people do. But yeah, but Destiny banned me, right? And I don't understand why, right? Because all I did was because there were people talking about how bad it is that Destiny was supporting what Israel was doing in Palestine. And all I said is that Aryan Destiny supports all genocides. That's all I said. I said Aryan Destiny supports all genocides, and this is seen in his support both for Israel and what they're doing in Gaza, and his support for Ukraine in the war against Russia. And it's entirely consistent in what he's doing, right? So I don't get it. Like it's very clear. Aryan Destiny supports all genocides, and he banned me for saying that. And I wonder, and you know what I'm wondering? I'm wondering if maybe it's a straw that broke the camel's back, right? Because I've been saying that maybe perhaps possibly the Holocaust didn't happen, and I think Destiny was angry at me for that, right? Because I think Aryan Destiny's position on that is not that such a thing should be denied, but that it should be celebrated, right? And that he's looking down on me for my soft-heartedness in trying to deny that as opposed to celebrating it. And I really genuinely think that's why he banned me. I think that's why, or blocked me. I think it's a really sad affair that I couldn't live up to the baseness of Aryan Destiny. So sad thing, sad event. Sad. What do we have here? What are some other things I have? Oh, here's this one. Oh, here's this one. I kind of like this one. This is an old one, but I like this one. Why didn't Hitler partner up with Stalin against the West? That wasn't Stalin's plan. Like, okay, the thing about the icebreaker strategy is people have all sorts of like opposition to the icebreaker strategy, but the icebreaker strategy it makes perfect sense in understanding why the Soviet Union did what they did. Right? When people who are like denying the icebreaker strategy, like they have to explain why Stalin didn't attack Germany in May of 1940. Right? Once Germany had committed to the attack on France, why didn't the Soviet Union immediately attack?
Allowed here.
I sent $10. You should stream again with Cozy Rob, my friend, sometime.
I should. I mean, this stream was sort of like put together, sort of slapdash. But yeah, I have to reset up the Discord and all that. But yeah, nothing against streaming against Cozy Rob. I'm actually getting at a period where I'm getting some time off of off of work. But can you believe it? I actually do. I actually have been working. Like I don't have free money. So yeah, sure. I mean, we could. I'm perfectly fine with doing a stream with Cozy Rob. I really enjoyed the stream with Cozy Rob. But anyway, so what I was saying to Mappy Monde, why didn't Hitler partner up with Stalin against the West? Stalin was never going to partner up with Hitler, and the reason for that is Stalin's plan was never to partner up with Hitler. It was to eventually go to war with Hitler, as Hitler was bogged down in France. Right now, obviously, the fall of France, the wheels of that plan flew off immediately once France fell, far quicker than anyone anticipated, including the Germans. But that gets back to the icebreaker strategy, and people who deny the icebreaker strategy, I mean, they have to explain why the Soviet Union did not invade in May of 1940. Right? It's not, and this idea, the Soviets didn't invade because they weren't prepared. That's also retarded. Like, when has not being prepared, like Finland? Hello? Like, they weren't prepared to invade Finland, and yet they did it. They weren't really prepared to invade Poland, and they did it, although, Poland didn't really put up much of a resistance against the Soviets after the Germans invaded, so that wasn't really that much. But, I don't know, looking at Finland, it really doesn't look like a lack of preparation is any deterrent to a Soviet invasion, especially at the time. Like, the Germans had something like really thin. They had like 10 divisions facing the Soviet Union while they were at war with France. It was bare. So you could say that, they're unprepared. Okay, but the Soviets are going to outnumber them 10-1. And they're going to have a certain level of attacker's advantage in that situation, I think. I think when you outnumber them 10-1, you have an attacker's advantage. That is, you're going to inflict more casualties than you take, even at so anyone who's opposed to the icebreaker strategy and thinks that the icebreaker strategy is not validated or is what they're doing is they're demanding like very specific evidence, as opposed to the biggest piece of evidence, which is inferential, but it's an overwhelming piece of inferential evidence that the icebreaker strategy is true, which is that the Soviet Union did not attack in May of 1940. Okay. So, and frankly, why did Hitler attack France in May of 1940, knowing that there's this giant Soviet behemoth on his border, which, contrary to any phrase he may have made later about how we'll kick in the door and the whole thing crumbling down, Hitler's actions shows that he took the Soviet Union's military capacity very seriously. That he did not write them off. Like, he may have made that one quote, but if you look at the the preparations and the resources he put into the initial invasion of the Soviet Union, it's very clear he took it very seriously, right? And that statement, oh, we'll just kick in the door and they'll come crumbling down. His actions contradict that bravado, right? His actions show that he took it very seriously. Okay, but if that's the case, why would Hitler attack France when he has the Soviet Union right on his border? And it seems, and to me, it's obvious that Hitler was operating on the assumption that the icebreaker strategy was true, that Hitler believed that Stalin was following the icebreaker strategy. Right? Hitler believed it, and that's why he put so much into France, and left so little on the Soviet border. It was because he knew what Stalin's plan was. So yeah, the icebreaker, like both of those pieces of evidence. Well, I mean, Hitler's attack just shows that Hitler believed in the icebreaker strategy, which is not itself evidence of it. But the fact that the Soviets didn't attack, if you're a reasonable person, that's the smoking gun. Like, that's nearly proof that it's true. That's basically proof that the icebreaker strategy is true, that they didn't attack. And all the other stuff about Soviet troop movements, Soviet troop concentrations on the border that Suvorov goes into, that frankly, that's just icing on the cake, right? That's not even necessary. The proof of the icebreaker strategy is they didn't attack in May of 1940. That's the proof. Okay? Done. Right? And you don't need to have a debate beyond that. Yeah, his recorded conversation, with Mannerheim. Yeah. But I don't think so even though Hitler, for example, underestimated the number of tanks that the Soviets had, and also underestimated their reserves, even then, Hitler still put everything he could plausibly put into the invasion of the Soviet Union. It's not like he could have put in more. He could have pulled more reserves out of France, for example, but that would have just clogged logistics, right? So the amount of troops that the Germans could put into the Soviet Union, initially, later on this wasn't the case, but initially was limited not by the forces that they had, but was limited by the forces that they could supply. And even then, they ultimately put more into the Soviet Union than they could actually supply because they overestimated how good Soviet infrastructure was. So they actually put in too much. They actually put in too much on the front than they could reasonably supply because they overestimated Soviet infrastructure. So no. Speer said Hitler was surprised when the Allies actually declared war. He may have been. I don't know. That's hard to say. First off, that's hearsay. One, that's hearsay, and two, that's memory. So Speer, describe Hitler's emotions in 1939 when France and Britain declared war. Like, who knows? Who knows if his memory of that is accurate? It's whatever. It's also kind of immaterial to what we're talking about, the point of which is basically the foundational myth of Nazi aggression. Right? That's what we're talking about. And so a lot of this little hearsay stuff is kind of unimportant. As is your personal opinion on whether or not you'd like the German annexation of Bohemia and Moravia. You could dislike that. Okay, fine. Dislike it all you want. But the point is that it's not, or you could say that, well, regarding Poland, Hitler should not, even if Poland did, even if someone could say, well, I'm in total agreement with everything you're saying about what Poland did. I'm in total agreement, or I'm going to grant you that for the sake of argument, but that's still not worth a full-on war, right? Because you could say, let's say that the German accounts of the killings of Germans, say it's 12,000. A lot more died in the war than that. So from a frankly, from a white nationalist perspective, that's bad, right? because Germans are not, because from a white nationalist perspective, Germans are not above Poles, right? Right, and a war caused a lot more death of Poles and Germans than were caused by the entirety of the Polish pogroms against the Germans, right? So you could say it's not like none of this is worth a war from a white nationalist perspective, and that's true, right? That's absolutely true, right? And so my position. So if people want to know my position on Germany, like, do I think Germany was justified in attacking Poland? Yes. Do I think Hitler should have attacked Poland? No. Even if Hitler knew with absolute certainty that France and Britain would not declare war on Germany if Germany attacked Poland, even if that was the case, I would be opposed to Hitler's attack on Poland on basically purely, white nationalist grounds, that it's not good, it's not worth it, right? So people who are saying that like somebody who so what people are missing the point when I argue that Nazi Germany was not some implacable aggressor. The point is not to justify any of these things or to say that Germany's invasion of Poland was good, right? I don't think it was. Right? And if I was in charge of Germany at the time, I would not order the invasion of Poland, basically almost no matter what the Poles did, right? Because I don't care about Germany per se, right? I don't care about Germany, right? And I don't care about Poland, right? I care about Europe and Europeans. Right, and Poles and Germans are not different, really. Right, so that's my view on that, and so I don't I don't I'm not a fan of what Hitler did. I'm not a fan of some greater German empire or anything like that. But I'm just saying that the foundational myth of NATO, which is used which is currently being used as the sort of the founding religious justification for the support of Ukraine in their war against Russia, is a lie, right? And this lie is getting a lot more white people killed today. That's what I'm saying, right? And that's the problem with this. That's the problem with this narrative. And the thing is, that has nothing to do with the Nazi regime in particular. The Nazi regime is gone. There are no Nazis. You say, people could become fascist again. There are no fascists. There never was a fascist, because fascism isn't a real thing, right? Frankly, in my opinion, it was a 1930s political buzzword. Okay, I don't think it's a real thing. In the same, you know what? Fascism is as real as MAGA. Okay, MAGA's not a thing. It's not a real thing. It's just a phrase. It's just a buzzword. Right, and that's kind of what fascism was, right? It's not something to be fought against. It's not even real, right? The Italian regime under Mussolini was a very particular regime that had its particular traits, right? The German regime under Hitler was a very particular regime with its particular traits, right? The regime under Poland, the regime under Franco, these were just autocratic regimes with certain traits. That's it. Right, to call something fascist, I mean, you call the Habsburg monarchy fascist or something, right? You call the Hohenzollerns fascist. It's not a thing. There's nothing, right? And people try, and these shit-eating academics, they try to say, well, fascism is the nation and the state and corporations and government interventions, but there's nothing particular that you can point to, right? Some Lobers try to say they try to define fascism in terms of corporate government partnerships, and then they use that to say that the United States is currently fascist or some dumb shit. It doesn't mean anything. It means everything, I should say. And because it means everything, it means nothing, right? And conservatives will call modern day shit libs fascists. They'll call them eco-fascists. It's not a thing. It's just not a thing. There's no such thing as fascism. There never was. It's a political buzzword that was invented in the 1930s a whole bunch of lies were told about the Italian governments, more so about the German governments, and the lies that were told about the Nazi regime then became quote unquote fascism, and that then became a pejorative of anyone you don't like. Right? That's all. That's what happened. That's all it is. Evola was a woo mystic who wrote a lot of words, said nothing. Hitler didn't have any particular economic ideology. His national ideology was not unique. It was totally in line with German imperial tradition, right? There's nothing new of what Hitler was saying about Germany's manifest destiny to basically push into the East. That was something that goes back to the Kaiser times. Okay, so Hitler wasn't new in that. He didn't invent that. Okay. Right, that was what as World War I went on, that's that sort of thinking, of Germany's destiny of cultural conquest of the East was like that was something that was baked in, probably going back before the 1900s, probably going back straight to 1871 even, right? So there's nothing new there. So you could call that fascist, but then that goes back to the problem of everything being fascist, right? So it's nothing. It's nothing. Fascism is nothing. There is no fascism. There never was a fascism, right? There you go. Fascism just means not controlled by Jays. There you go. That's probably a good definition of fascism. The problem is you also have like conservatives and MAGA types calling like the Biden regime and the Obama regime fascist as well. Like, whatever, So yeah, it goes back to the Crusades in the east of Europe, right? Yeah. All right, guys. So what do I want to do now? Because I'm I'm done with the content. So what do we do when we're out of content? What do we do when we have no content going on? What do we do? What do we do, guys? There's a bit of a lag in the stream, so I have to wait for you guys to answer. Play Buckshot Roulette. I don't have it. Browse Grinder. Talk about Antarctic Germans. Well, we're not allowed to talk about the Antarctic Germans. That's, I'm already on thin ice talking about the foundational myth of NATO being false. But if I reveal the truth about the Antarctic Germans and the Nazi moon base, don't forget the Nazi moon base and the Antarctic Germans. If I talk about that, that's where the CIA really gets in on you, when you start revealing that lore and that truth. So, sorry, I can't tell you about that. It's too much. It's too much of a bridge for me. Yeah, it's utterly irrelevant what Mussolini claimed. That is true. That is true. We play how far as Italians and do fascism right. Your favorite conspiracy theory? I guess my favorite conspiracy theory would be the one that I believe, and this is of course something that gets me into a lot of trouble. It's that I don't think Hiroshima and Nagasaki were nuked, and I've talked about that before, and that's like, people hear that and they think it's insane, and the reason that they think it's insane is for two reasons. One, they overestimate how difficult it would be to fake. I guess we could say three reasons. One, they overestimate how difficult it would be to fake. Two, they overestimate the importance of sort of convergent memory. Right? They overestimate how difficult it would be to get a large number of people to believe in an event that didn't happen. Right? And I guess the third reason is they don't know just how slapdash the Manhattan Project was, and how basically basically how the Manhattan Project, if you believe the official story, they got the nuke to work on its first try without any prototyping, right? And how most of the people working on it did not believe that the nuke would work on its first try. So that's, and there's also a lot of, so those are sort of the three big things. There's also like particular evidences, right? You get into the weeds. For example, like a bombing, like there's evidence of a bombing raid on Hiroshima and Nagasaki just before the bombs are dropped. And there's like accounts, there's like personal accounts of such bombing raids, but then you look at the Air Force official like bombing list of Japan, and they're not there. So you have guys saying that they were there and they were part of those raids, but then you look at the official bombing list and they're not there, right? So that's an issue, right? Anyway, I don't, that's a less important thing. And the reason, I guess maybe it's not my favorite conspiracy because it doesn't go anywhere, right? Because obviously they did make nukes later, right? Obviously nukes are real. Nuclear power has been real long before nuclear, because nuclear power is a lot easier to do than nuclear weapons. Just look at the Demon Core, right? That's a very rudimentary nuclear reactor. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, two very different nukes the first time. So I don't. One of the reasons I don't really feel like going too far into that I think Hiroshima and Nagasaki weren't actually nuked is because it doesn't go anywhere, right? Because the United States eventually did make nukes, and nukes are real. So it's not. It doesn't really matter going forward, right? That's kind of the issue. It's an interesting sort of thing. It's also an interesting case study in how easy it is to control information on that. If a lot of people would go, well, if it was fake, there are so many people involved in the Manhattan Project, but the reality is most people involved in the Manhattan Project actually had no idea what they were making. Very few even knew it had anything to do with atoms at all, right? So people can imagine that, well, it's such a big project, how do you keep it secret? This also, this may be a topic for another stream, is bad general arguments against large conspiracies. Because one of the bad arguments against large conspiracies is, if there's so many people in on it, somebody would say something, right? And that's a bad argument for a variety of reasons. One is people often do say something, but so what, right? WikiLeaks has said a lot of things. Okay, so what? What happens for that? Or let's say someone does say something. Okay, what do? You post it on Twitter. Okay, so what? Some people see it, some people believe it. Well, now you have just a bunch of conspiracy theorists. Now you've just created a new conspiracy theory and a whole bunch of more conspiracy theorists. That's all that happens. That's usually all that happens when you have a whistleblower, right? It's not, it's not like a Hollywood movie where the scheme gets found out, and then as soon as word gets out of the scheme, everything explodes. That doesn't happen, right? So that's when people say, well, if there's so many people in it, somebody would say something. But people say something all the time. There's just no guarantee that it's going to go anywhere, right? Especially when you have media controlled by 6, I think it's now 7 major organizations control 90% of what people see. It doesn't necessarily, yeah. So a lot of the arguments against the idea that Hiroshima and Nagasaki weren't necessarily nuked, it's the same arguments that have to deal with anti-conspiracy reasoning in general. and a lot of that is flawed. And maybe that should be like another video or stream or something where I say why you should believe in more conspiracies, right? Why, or right, and a lot of the fallacies of anti-conspiratorial thinking, right? Because there's a lot of fallacies that people make when arguing against grand conspiracies. Yeah, there is a video that one guy did that actually went into like some detail about Enola Gay and a lot of the weirdness about that. But anyway, so maybe they assaulted the area with radioactive isotope dust. Jimmy John, that's interesting that you say that, because there was a test at Los Alamos where they actually spiked radioactive isotopes on a whole bunch of conventional explosives, right? So they put radioactive isotopes on conventional explosives and then measured, whether the radioactive isotopes would be detectable in the surrounding area from a conventional explosive blast. And they did, and they went around and they found, yep, they were. Why would they do a test like that? What's the purpose of a test of taking conventional explosives, putting radioactive isotopes on it, and then seeing if they would be detectable after the explosion? What is the purpose of that? Why would you do that? All right. I mean, that's sort of like to ask the question is to answer it. So, anyway, I'm reading myself, but have you ever thought about speaking with Arvel? You've both been trying to make study group schools. It'd be a shame if you did. I don't know who Arvel is. Yeah. My wife and I are planning our third child in the near future. Fantastic. When are you going to have a wife and have a baby? Probably not, unfortunately. Probably not. Yeah. I wish there was a permanent forum to discuss about these topics. I've always avoided 4chan, and most people say it's filled with bad actors now. Yeah, 4chan has always been kind of a sewer, but, it's also been... 4chan is sort of like a high... Eric Orwell, okay. 4chan has always been sort of I would call it a high mutational environment, right? Where you get a lot of new ideas. And most new ideas are bad. But in order to get the good new ideas, you have to be in a place where new ideas are allowed, right? You have to have a place where bad new ideas are allowed. So, what about Hiroshima that you don't buy? Okay, I actually did a previous stream on this. It's actually on the YouTube channel right now. You can go watch that. It's a stream with Aiden Paladin where I talk about it. You have to be good at parsing the bullshit on port. Most people aren't. Yeah, there's a lot of 4chan has things on it. We'll say. I don't know. I think, but the thing is, though, I'll say this: that that if I want to do streaming like on the regular, and look, I don't find myself to be like entitled to this. Like if I'm just gonna say this right now. I'm just gonna need more than $28. If I'm gonna go back to like, full-time streaming, that's just the reality of it. And if you're not, then you're not, and that's fine. I'll just go back to work. And this is what I'll say. Have links to Rumble, Odyssey? Yes, it's on my Twitter. Guys, I spend, like, what time I spend on the internet, it's on Twitter. So, like, Twitter is sort of like my internet center at this point. Okay? Which is weird, because for the longest time, I always viewed Twitter as kind of like a low place. And I still sort of do.
GG sent $10. Would you have voted for Romi's army? By the way, Does the success of the Indian people prove the effectiveness of the caste system? Also, how much do I have to pay you to follow me on Twitter?
Okay, so GG sent $10. He says, would you have voted for Ramaswamy? Yes. Because he would be running against a Democrat. Period. And also, I don't know much about Ramaswamy, but I mean, he says the right things about immigration and stuff. I mean, obviously, you know, he's a Pajit, but you know, I'm not like I'm not like an individual like racist. Okay, so I'm not going to be against Ramaswamy just because he's a Pajit. All right. By the way, does the success of the Indian people prove the effectiveness of the caste system? I mean, it proves the existence of the caste system, right? Because India, right? So I think what you're pointing at is that India is massively multimodal IQ, right? Yeah, I mean, it shows the existence of the caste system, right? That you have certain groups that are smarter, and they all stay with themselves, and they've basically managed to sort of preserve, from what we're measuring, and they preserve other things, but what we're really measuring the best is IQ scores, and they're able to preserve those IQ scores through their, you know, through you know, keeping the bloodline not pure, we'll say, but keeping it from low IQ introductions, we'll say. Also, how much would I have to pay you to follow me on Twitter? Or you've paid me $15. I'll follow you. I don't know what your Twitter account is, GG. I mean, I'll follow you. Like if you really want me to follow you, if you really think there's something that you need me to hear, I'll follow you if you want. I don't know. I don't know if you're on Cozy or if you're on YouTube, or I'm looking at the chat for like GG. But yeah, I'll follow you if you want. The average Indian IQ is midnight. No, it's like I don't know. Based on Lynn's work, it's like 81. Now, keep in mind, though, that when Lynn was doing that, India was poorer than it is now. So there are legitimate environmental issues that would depress India's IQ. Keep in mind that if you look at sub-Saharan Africa, that's like sub-70 IQ for sub-Saharan Africa. But of course, if you took based on the admixture of Africans in the U.S. and Africans in Europe, sort of like what we would call, this isn't an appropriate term, but sort of like a rough term would be like the genetic IQ of the pure black African. I mean, of course, every population in Africa it's sort of an average of all like the sort of haplotypes of sub-Saharan Africa, which aren't going to be identical. But if you took like a really rough, really napkin sort of like what is the quote unquote genetic IQ that compared to other races put in the same environment, they would be like 81. Would be like the pure quote unquote black sub-Saharan African IQ, right? It's a very rough aggregate thing, right? Obviously, it's going to vary from region to region, but that 81 would be what you would predict for them. For Indians, and again, within India, even more so than sub-Saharan Africa, is multimodal. But if you took like the average of all Indians, right, from the south up to the north, you'd probably have something like around 91, 92. Now if you go way south, you're getting to IQs that are similar to that of sub-Saharan Africans. You go further north, you're getting IQs similar to that of Europeans. Right? That's what I have to say about that. Bantus versus Ethiopians, big variance. Yeah, I don't know about that. I don't know about Ethiopians. Yeah, I mean, the thing about IQ, and I talk about IQ, it's sort of like it's difficult, right? Because I'm promoting like part of my shtick has always been promote white interests, right? Promote white interests. Okay. But part of promoting white interests is dealing with this ball and chain of the oppression narrative. And one of the biggest ways to deal with the oppression narrative is to talk about IQ, right? because IQ is so powerful, it's so predictive, and it just refutes so much of the oppression narrative. But then people go, oh, you're talking about IQ because you want to say that whites are like the smartest at everything, like which is retarded, because if you actually look at like hereditarian data, it doesn't say that at all. Whites are like above most, but it doesn't. But there's segments of Indians that are substantially higher, right? And if you just care about IQ per se, like, you wouldn't be like a white nationalist. You'd be like, you look at like Mormons that are at like 111, or like or certain subgroups of whites that are like above that, or you'd say, well, Jews are at like 109, 112 or whatever. There's all sorts of little subsets that are way higher than like the gross European average of 100, right? So the fact that someone identifies as a white nationalist and not an IQ nationalist should be a very big clue that they're not obsessed with IQ per se, but IQ is important in dealing with all of these lies, dealing with all these oppression narratives. That's the point of it, right? It's the point to say, especially and this is a very kind of a United States centric thing, although it's becoming a deal in Europe as they import Africans themselves, is the point that, look, these inequalities between the races, these are a function of legitimate outcomes in a meritocracy. It's not a function of oppression or being put upon. Right? That's the point of IQ. It's not about like, I'm an amazing, wonderful person because I have a high IQ. Right? Like, nobody cares. Nobody cares about your IQ. Right? Like they don't. People don't care about your high IQ, and frankly, there's a very good chance that they don't even appreciate your high IQ. All right, so they don't. Nobody cares about your IQ. The point of using IQ is very specific as a deconstruction tool, right? It's about deconstruction. It's about dealing with the oppression narrative, right? Nothing more, right? IQ itself doesn't matter per se. So that's the point. Are Mennonites higher than the U.S. average? Look, you're asking about my memory.
We're sorry,
like,
but
these are
your
things that you can look
kind
up.
isn't allowed here.
GG sent $50 at Stephanie Smith's my
Holy
just
shit.
Find this stuff interesting, that's all. It's really sad to hear you won't have children, Ryan. I can arrange you with my sister if you'd like.
Wow, $50. Like, Gigi, I was gonna follow you, like, just if you told me your username in chat. Although, in fairness, I probably wasn't looking well enough. But shoot, well, thanks, Gigi. Yeah, I'll follow you right now. Let's see. Maybe I should change what's on the screen. I'm a bad streamer. Like, I don't have like stuff on the screen, really. Like, I'm a bad streamer. Let me find. I'm following him right away. Holy moly. Yeah. Anyway, thanks a lot, Steve and me. That's very, very, very generous of you. How would you feel if you didn't eat breakfast? Asked John Hammond. I have no idea. I mean, I ate breakfast. What are you talking about, John Hammond? You're not making any sense. I ate breakfast. So, like whatever, dude. Brazil, you send it through a system called Power Chat. Oh, do I not have the link on YouTube? Oh, I may not have the link. Maybe that's why. I'm a bad streamer, guys. Like, I don't do anything. I don't do anything right. So yeah, I have to. If I get back into streaming like properly, as opposed to my annual streams, Ryan Falk's annual streams. If I get back into streaming properly, I have to actually like set things up and, and just basically get the machine, because it's like a habit, right? It's almost like you develop a machine that you sort of work through like day in, day out, and you get more efficient at it over time. And since I haven't been doing it really much, I'm really inefficient right now. So all you're getting right here is a little picture here of Churchill in his cuck box, and me talking about whatever, which I guess is fine because people care, watch, whatever. You don't have to stream for 3 hours either. Sure, but you know what? It's actually easy to stream for 3 hours if you're just babbling, which is what I'm doing, and just talking with the chat. So it's actually pretty easy. Yeah, I guess that's it's fine. Anyway, stream for your tuck. How would you feel if you never changed the batteries in your smoke alarm? I don't know, man. You don't. The thing about smoke alarms, I don't know if you know this, but if you just ignore them, if you just ignore the smoke alarm, after a while they stop beeping. So I mean, that's what I do. They just stop beeping after a while. So it kind of sucks for a little while because they go beep, beep every once in a while, but then they just stop. So yeah, a lot of people say that like ignoring a problem doesn't make it go away. Not true. Not true. The beeping in my smoke alarms, I ignored it and it went away.
But your kind
so there you go.
Allowed here.
He said $5. Ryan, how likely do you think Southern secession is if Joe Biden wins in 2024?
Let's see. I'm letting people choose the voices, and I don't know if that's true. Oh my gosh, Gigi went again. Gigi's oh my god, this is so bad. Okay, Ryan, how likely do you think Southern secession is if Joe Biden wins in 2024? 1% chance. It's sad, but the reality is that every state has had roughly, and it changes from year to year, but every state, and has roughly had about 1/3 of their population in favor of their state seceding from the Union. Now, in most countries, that would be, everyone would talk about that. That would be a big deal. But in the United States, it's something that's oddly not really reported on that much, that about 1/3 of the population opposes the Union. And this is something that's very consistent. It's consistent across age groups. Actually, it's higher among younger people. It's consistent across age groups. It's consistent across races. It's consistent across the political spectrum. Support for secession has been at about 1/3. And asterisk there. There's a little caveat there that I'll explain. Has been about 1/3 for as long as it's been measured. Okay, so this idea that everyone in the U.S. would rally around the flag if anyone tried to secede, I don't think is nearly as true as a lot of people think. Now, obviously, people in states will support secession if a president of the opposite party is in power, right? So when Trump is in power, secession support among California was higher than it is now that Biden's in power, and vice versa, right? Like Wyoming is going to be more pro-secession with Joe Biden in power than they will be with Trump in power. So it swings back and forth based on that. But unfortunately, but the thing is, it's been that high for a long time, and the problem is, I don't think things are going to get bad enough. They're not going to get bad enough for that, for people to support secession. Yeah, Churchill was a drunk, gambling addict who was just loyal to whoever paid his debts. So true, and that's one thing that David Irving wrote about that he did a fantastic job on, was just ripping into freaking Churchill. Yeah, Churchill proved that you can be a racist and not a national. Churchill was just. Churchill was a bad man. A bad man. Algorithmic beings. Oh, nice one. Yeah. Oh yeah, I made a video called the algorithmic man or something like that. It's funny. Like I did that a long time ago, and now that AI is starting. Now you're starting to get AIs and chatbots that can reliably pass the Turing test. Now people are having much more serious discussions about the algorithmic man. They're not using that term, but they're basically talking about those sorts of things, which I think is kind of funny. Hello from the middle of a war zone. Lord Richard, are you in Ukraine? Great Britain survived the bombings because people were... Great Britain survived the bombings because the Germans never had any real plan to attack Britain. like they were just in a situation where they were at war with Britain when Britain would not accept terms, and that was that. Right? That's all that happened. Right? There was no... But anyway, so one thing I want to say is that, like, I guess my power chat is not properly set up or it's not linked or whatever. So don't worry about donating, guys. And plus, this stream is just, was just sort of slapdash put together at a moment. It's just because I felt like doing so, and it just sort of assembled a bunch of stuff that I thought would be neat, and I just sort of rambled. Right, that's all that happened here. Ryan, what do you think about the Dreyfus affair? I remember having really strong opinions about the Dreyfus affair, but at this moment, I don't remember what it is. But I do remember having known what it was and having had a strong opinion about it. Sorry about that. What do you think about the lack of selection pressure and mutational load? I think what Bronsky's work on that is Bronsky's sort of collation of the studies on that and sort of popularizing that and sort of coining that. It reveals a lot. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a practically useful thing because first off, at any point in time, you're going to have a certain amount of mutational load and you're going to have that tendency towards quote unquote leftism. But one thing that I will say is that stuff, let me put it this way. What a mutational load is going to tell you is how much quote-unquote leftism, right, which is a term that I kind of don't like, is going to exist at any point in time, but it's not really going to tell you what leftism
but
is.
Your kind
right?
isn't allowed here.
新と$5 do you know what the European Revolution equivalent genetic pacification event was in East Asia? Or is there some other explanation for their high civilizational potential?
Why are you guys
We're
picking...
sorry, but your kind isn't allowed here.
Oh. 新と$5 do you know what the European Revolution equivalent genetic pacification event was in East Asia? Or is there some other explanation for their high civilizational potential?
Okay.
We're sorry, but your kind isn't allowed here.
He said $5. Ryan, you should invest in getting a mail-order bride from Russia or something. You can have a bunch of blue egg babbies with them. They would love it.
Okay. Okay, so I'll respond to this. First, I want to respond to Gigi. Shinto, you actually donated twice. Where are you in the chat? I can refund one of those. If you don't respond, I'll refund one of those because you sent the same power chat twice. So I'll wait for you to respond. If you don't respond, I'll refund it. Okay. So first response to Shinto. Do you know what the European Revolution equivalent / genetic pacification event was in East Asia, or is there some other explanation for their high civilizational potential? I haven't.
Sorry, but your kind isn't allowed here.
And then they said $10. Do you know about the legal report that predicts of Americans could be dead by 2025? What? The excessive. When will the government admit anything?
Is it? Guys, why are you choosing like these bad voices? I'll read it so people can understand what you actually sent. But why are you choosing these terrible voices? Just choose like a default you can go through the list of voices to choose. There's some that are obviously going to be easier to understand than others. I don't know why you're choosing these terrible voices. Okay, so first, let me finish with Shinto. Do you know what the European Revolution equivalent / genetic pacification event was in East Asia, or is there some other explanation of high IQ civilizational potential? I obviously did not look into that in the same way that I looked into Europe and what I call the European Revolution there. But what I will say, but to give you any kind of answer, I will say that in my opinion, China, Japan, Korea, they obviously selected for certain traits. They selected for a slightly higher IQ with less of a verbal tilt than Europe and more of a quantitative tilt than Europeans. And but they also selected for a lot more conformity in their behavior. And this selection for conformity in the behavior, in my opinion, this is something that occurred over a longer period of time and was not a result of some big change. Like in the European Revolution, there was a big change in terms of what we call the war on murder and the massive differential in fertility between the upper classes and lower classes. Okay, so in Europe there was a big change, which caused a massive change in the European population. In East Asia, I don't think there was much of a change. I think that the societies that they created selected for kind of the East Asian median that we see today, going back, personally, I believe fixation for the sort of the traits of the East Asians had been achieved by, like 1000 AD, right? That's my opinion. And that this selection for those traits has not changed, that they've been at that level and relatively static all for a longer time. Whereas I think with Europeans, it was a much more of a rapid thing. But I don't know that for sure. That's just my opinion, and I'm responding to you because you sent $5. Shinto, I don't see Shinto in the chat, so I'm just gonna refund one of these.
We're sorry, but your kind isn't allowed here.
Okay.
Shinto sent $5. Do you know what the European Revolution equivalent genetic pacification event was in East Asia, or is there some other explanation for their high civilizational potential?
Okay, that's the same chat sent again. Shoot. Okay, so I'm gonna go through the other two now. So I'm gonna look at. So GG sent a chat. Okay, so Ryan, you should invest in getting a mail order bride from Russia or something. You can have a bunch of blue-eyed babies with them. You would love it. GG, if you want to talk about this in DMs. Don't talk about this in super chats. Thank you very much for the $5. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate what you've done. But don't just contact me on DMs on Twitter, which are now open to you because I'm following you. Okay. Anyways, so $10 from Anonymous. Do you know about the Deagle report that predicts 88% of Americans dead by 2025? Yes, I do. What are your thoughts on the excess deaths? When will the government admit anything? Okay, I don't know any more about that than you. But then you ask the question, when will the government admit anything? Okay, to ask that question is to answer it. And the answer is never, right? Until it happens, if it happens. What are your thoughts on the excess deaths? I don't know. I see two explanations for that. One is that there's some people at Deagle who have some insider knowledge about something that's, well, actually I see three, but two I think are the more plausible. One is that there's actually some guys at Deagle who actually know something about some big mass death event that's going to happen by 2025, which is coming up pretty soon here. That's possibility one. Possibility two there's some guy with a lot more money than sense who put a lot of money on that option for whatever reason, that he thought he had some insider knowledge that he didn't really have or wasn't really as true as he thought it was. Right, that's option 2. Option 3 is what they were thinking could have been the COVID and the whole vaccine thing that ended up not being nearly as deadly as they thought it would be. And I remember back when I was more interested in the COVID stuff that I did come to the conclusion. First off, the virus was absolutely engineered. Right? That's there's the circumstantial evidence pointing to the virus being engineered, right, in the Wuhan lab is just overwhelming. Right? So it was an engineered thing, and it, like, you could say, well, it wasn't a deliberate release; it was an accident. It may have been engineered, but it was an accidental escape. It's like, okay, but the accidental escape was at the time of the election, right? So, and also, and another thing is, anyway, there's a whole bunch, and we also know that, like, in 2015, 2016, 2017, there was a big spike in media talking about anti-vaxxers that just came out of nowhere. Like, never before in media history was there a big focus on anti-vaxxers. In fact, I you know what? I may be able to talk about that right now. Google Trends. So Google Trends just tells you what people are searching, but I think looking at what people are searching is a good indicator of what people are hearing on media. So let's do this. I'm getting it up right now, and I'll put it on the main screen. Actually, let's just do this right here. Here. Okay. So this is anti-vaxxer interest over time. I don't know what's going on over here. Then we have a little bit of a blip. Then we have something going on up here in February 2015. Anti-vaxxer. Maybe we should add more. Let's try, like, anti-vaxxer without that. Anti-vax. And then, like, anti-vax. So here we go. Okay, this gives you a much better, much clearer view of what's going on. So this is why, like, this is one piece of circumstantial evidence. First off, the fact that it came out, like, right outside of Wuhan is evidence that it was engineered. But was it an intentional release? Well, when did it start popping off? Sort of, right? It started popping off sort of like here, right? Like January 2021, like right in here is when the virus started popping, like right at the end of Trump's term, right, going into the 2020-21 elections, right? So was it January 20? Oh my god, huge brain. Was it 2020 or 2021 when the virus started popping off? Holy shit, I'm getting my years mixed up. Holy moly. I don't think it really matters much, because when you look over here, this is where, right, like down in here, anti-vaxxer, like sort of in 2019, because this is something that I noticed, right, just sort of incidentally, like back in 2018 up to 2019, I noticed that, like, like even Family Guy and like sitcoms were having all these episodes about anti-vaxxers out of nowhere, and I was like, why are they? This is weird. Why are they suddenly talking about this? Right. So, and that is like right before, the release of the the Japs. That's sort of why I think it. I was talking about I was responding to a power chat about that. But anyway, yeah. So the weird Deagle numbers. I don't know though. If they say 88% of Americans dead by 2025, so what do we have? We have like 9 months. We have like 21 months for this to happen. Now, in my opinion, if this was going to happen in 21 months, we would probably be seeing some of it starting by now. And we of course, we did see some excess deaths with the vax and the virus, but it wasn't anything. It wasn't anything approaching that number. Another possibility is it had nothing to do with the vax at all. It had to do with nuclear war with Russia. So that's one thing it could be. It could be nuclear war with Russia. Yeah, maybe they mean nukes. Yeah, that's one possibility. But see, I don't think you get to 88% with the nukes start flying. Now that said, 88% doesn't necessarily mean all those people are killed, right? It could mean that the population goes down by 88%, right? So that could mean the United States is a target of nuclear warfare, and people end up just leaving all over the place. And it could also mean secession. It could be a combination of emigration and secession, leaving the remainder like U.S. rump state to be much smaller. Like it could be all sorts of those things. Like, there's all sorts of things that could happen that could reduce the population of whatever is the territory of the United States government by 88%, right? And it's not necessary, and it doesn't necessarily have to be all those people die, right? It could be, it could be a lot of things. But I don't think and it's always really rough when you gainsay prediction markets. Gainsay prediction markets at your own peril. But the prediction markets were wrong about Trump in 2016. Okay, so I don't. There's not a whole lot more that I know to say on that. So I think I basically said all that I know to say. People say anti-vaxxers like it's a bad thing, and another thing, people don't think long term enough. Like this is something that Bronsky would say. And something that I would say before, although I didn't use the term mutational load. Bronsky really popularized the term mutational load. But something that people have said for a long time is that they wouldn't use the term mutational load. They would say something like, the advent of vaccines for everyone has reduced genetic fitness, right? That's sort of another thing that was kind of... it doesn't necessarily refer specifically to mutational load, but it's really adjacent and largely overlaps in terms of the effects. So people would say genetic fitness and how vaccines do reduce genetic fitness over multiple generations, and that is like going to be axiomatically true, right? So being an anti-vaxxer, like if you have a population, and if you go over like say 200 years or something, like the population that doesn't have vaccines is just going to be better at dealing with diseases and novel viruses than a population that's being vaccinated all the time, right? I mean, it's just the reality. Now they're going to suffer. They're going to pay the price in order to achieve that better immune system. They're going to have a lot more people dying, but they're going to have. But at the end of it, they're going to have more robust immune systems. That population is going to have more robust immune systems at the end of that that process. So it's a value judgment. It's long term versus short term. So actually, Ryan, actually, can we call it mute load for sure? Okay. So anyway. I think that's the end of the stream. Thank Thank you so much. Thank you a lot, GG man. DM me on Twitter if you want to talk about what you want to talk about. But yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised at how well the stream went. I'm pleasantly surprised that the multi-streaming actually worked, right? Because I was a bit worried that the multi-streaming simply would not work. Gabe Hoffman, I disavow the vile anti-Semite known as Ryan Falk. Gabe Hoffman, the real Gabe he's on Kick. Gabe Hoffman's on Kick, guys. Spreading anti-vaccine misinformation is dangerous and anti-Semitic. My name is Gabe Hoffman, and I am a successful Jewish hedge fund manager and a director of the critically acclaimed documentary An Open Secret, which exposed pedophilia in Hollywood. Ryan, talk about how to dethrone the medical. Yeah, that's... Ryan, talk about things. That's kind of what that question is. Ryan, talk about what you talk about all the time. But yeah, wow, I'm surprised that Gabe Hoffman is following me. I'm really honored that the real Gabe Hoffman is following me on Kick. Excellent. Nick is the best. All right. Okay, so I think I'm done with the stream, guys. What music should I have for the exit music? What music should I have for the exit music, guys? Because we need some exit music for the stream. Let's see, what do you got? What are people saying? Erica, End of Evangelion, Death Metal. Nah, we need something. You know what? Proto Man, that's pretty good. I don't know, something that's sort of a tune down. I know something we could do. Something that's pretty easy, pretty light. Paprika Parade Remix. Here we go. Here's something we could do. Check the audio. There we go. Just sort of light and react. There we go.